Could we have a roll call, please?
Sandra Bradford.
Here.
Barry Altshuler.
Here.
Leah Collister-Lazari.
Here.
Katie Karam.
Here.
Erin Chan Ding.
Here.
Steve Wang.
Here.
Diana Clapton.
All right, would you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, welcome again to our special Committee of the Whole meeting this evening. So we're set up a little bit differently tonight because it's a more of a discussion. And this is the meeting that we set aside every January to discuss the budget. We do have a couple related items so we will have a couple of presentations from the administration as well, but they all pertain to the budget conversation as well. And we will have a consent agenda that we will vote on in a few minutes as well. The other thing I have to report, Board, is that the Barrington Area Development Council has invited us and encouraged us to do CPR training together. So having a family member in my past that recently went into cardiac arrest, I know I can personally attest to the importance of this kind of life-saving training. And I look forward to us finding a date. And Leah has volunteered to help coordinate. And Dr. Winkleman, if you can help us find someone in the district to provide the training, I think we've got a few qualified people. That would be great. We can have our board social and do some CPR training.
Maybe a dinner or something with.
Yeah, we can maybe do that as well. Send your ideas to Leah.
I'm the person for this, I guess. So
Yes.
that's cool.
You
We'll figure it
belong.
out. We'll figure it out.
You're hired.
Can we invite others to come from the admin? I mean, or we can talk about it.
Yeah, we don't need, but it's not a discussion item for tonight.
It's a good
The
thing.
only other thing I wanted to mention is that the place to be this week is to stay warm, obviously. But tomorrow night, there is a jazz fest for the middle school and the high school at 7 p.m. in the auditorium. And that concludes my report. Next up is public comment. With that, let me just introduce our public comment section. This is a portion of our meeting that we set aside for public comment. Our board values your thoughts and opinions, and we will ensure that all voices are heard and respected in accordance with our board equity statement that states we recognize, embrace, and defend the identities, abilities, and voices of everyone in our school community. The board has set forth the rules in our policy in which public commenters have agreed to abide by. I don't need to go through those rules at this time, but I will remind everyone that this is a board meeting that occurs in public. It is not a public meeting. Therefore, public comment is not a conversation and does not necessarily reflect the views of the board. And if any comments require further attention, we're going to ask Dr. Winkleman to follow up and report back to the board. Okay, so with that, we have 2 people signed up for public comment this evening. So first up is Kristen Strickland. I think there's a sign there that says come right to that chair. Welcome.
Hi. Due to the broad nature of special education, parents rely on the school district to maintain open, honest, transparent lines of communication. That is not how the district has approached the dissolution of the Social Academic Support SAS program. The district's proposal to shift the landscape of the student support and place students in a more comprehensive therapeutic environment will essentially segregate disabled children with behavior deficits. Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA, sought to end this form of segregation in public schools. IDEA requires that students with disabilities be educated to the maximum extent possible with their non-disabled peers. I've witnessed firsthand the benefit that this can be for our children. This has also not been my experience here at Barrington 220, that we maximize the extent to which our students are educated with their non-disabled peers. And I am new as of August 2024. Students with behavior deficits require this interaction to learn appropriate behaviors and social skills from their non-disabled peers. A district-wide team whose sole responsibility is addressing behavior concerns expands the likelihood of discrimination, not based solely on ability, but based on race. And there are statistics to back that up. The manner in which the district has approached this policy change is in direct violation of their equity statement, which states, "The Board of Education will be equitable, inclusive, transparent," there was no transparency here, "respectful and impactful." Parents are in need of transparency. I am a parent. I need transparency because I have a child with an IEP. Is this change in policy financially motivated? Or is there research-based success that backs it? If so, what is the cost? Can the district provide research used to determine that this will be beneficial for our students? Are there any long-term effects for children from removing them from the classroom? How does this district intend to maintain equity for our disabled children? There are statistics that support minorities who are removed at higher rates than their counterparts. How can you assure me, as well as other parents, that this is not going to happen here? Children with behavior deficits are often stigmatized. They're labeled as bad, so are their parents. What the district is forgetting is about the why, and sometimes that can be beyond the parents' control. And programs like SAS and instructors like Ms. Lindblom, we need those, the programs and the parents. I'm almost done.
Thank you, Kristen. Can you wrap it up, please?
Yes. And in spite of their deficits, Ms. Lindblom was there every day, and she loved my kid for the few months he was in her class. And
Thank you, Kristen.
But our children.
go to the next
Yes,
speaker.
okay, but our children need normalcy, consistency, and academic support.
I understand.
And they're not going to get that if we dissolve this program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up is Kylie Humbert.
Hi, guys. I haven't seen so many of you in so long. Thanks for having me. For those whom I have not had the pleasure of working with, my name is Kylie Humbert. I have a son in Chinese immersion. He is a 6th grader and loving his time at Station, and I have a daughter, Carson, who's a 2nd grader Chinese immersion student at Rose. My family is not native speaking Chinese, so it's been incredible to have this opportunity for my kids to not only learn the language, but really just to be exposed to a global culture so outside of our everyday norm. So I thank you for offering that program. And I thank you guys for all of the time you spend here advocating for our kids and the families and the constituents of the community. We really appreciate it as parents. I know that this is often a forum for us to kind of complain, but we do appreciate you in the same breath. So the reason why I wanted to come tonight was just simply twofold. One, I've sent the board an email outlining a request for a special ed advisory board committee to have board members join the special ed advisory board committee just to increase transparency to the board with all the great things that are happening inside of the district with regard to special ed. And obviously to shine light on areas of opportunity as things are always in flux. And I think having board members involved in that special ed advisory board committee could really give the committee some oomph and just get more buy-in from you guys and more support, and all around couldn't hurt. So that would be my first request. The second request I have is just for an increased amount of transparency within the Barrington D220 special education kind of arena, for lack of better words, right? So just if changes are being made, like when a SAS program is dissolved and an email is sent to SAS parents, right? Let's make sure the board knows about that change. Let's make sure the parents who have kids in that program know about that change. Let's make sure the whole special ed program knows about that change, because it causes a lot of alarm and distress in an already really fragile community. With that being said, lots of things happen in a special ed environment, under the guise of law, but a lot of things happen just because they can happen, because that's the way the school is doing that. When procedural safeguards are changed, for only some families, that email is sent out. When we don't have streamlined policies and procedures that go out, it creates chaos. And these families are already really, really stressed, and it's really hard to advocate for a kid when things happen so inconsistently. So just by increasing transparency, hopefully by partnering with the board and creating some sort of more intense special ed advisory board committee, we can mitigate some of these problems before they happen. We do a lot right, so I think that's really important, you know. So let's talk more about the wins and some areas of improvement. So holler at me if you have questions. Love you guys. You're all really
Thanks, Kylie.
special.
So that actually concludes public comment. Dr. Winkleman, I know you've given some updates to the board on the SAS program and on the special ed advisory board. Maybe you could just give us another update in the packet this week?
Absolutely.
Because I thought we did have a special ed advisory committee underway, so.
We
Make sure we
do,
do.
and I will absolutely keep the board informed, just like we've already started that process. And just a general comment that, you know, we're starting the process at this time of year to allow the ample conversations that need to take place for our students and family. Those occur in an IEP meeting because it's individualized to the student's needs, and we absolutely will make sure that we take our time to have those individual conversations over the next several months, right? So that's part of it. And I want to make sure that also the board and community knows we've served students with a variety of needs, including some of the behavioral needs that our students have in our SAS program, but we're going to continue to meet their needs, just like we have as a district for a number of years. I started as a special education teacher serving students with behavioral needs in this district, different model, different program. So while we're looking at the program and how it's helping meet the needs of our students and how we deliver, I want to make sure that the board and community knows it's not a one-size-fits-all. We're going to work with students, figure out what the right program and placement is for those students and what the right fit. So it's not necessarily that we don't have this program and all students are removed from our schools. We will have those conversations in those individual IEP meetings and determine what's the right programming for each of those students. But more to come on that. I just wanted to make sure it was clear to the board tonight with some of the comments that were shared.
Excellent,
Yep.
thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, well, with that, why don't I turn it back over to you to give your
I'll
report?
just keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
All right, absolutely. So we'll get my report up there. Okay, my first slide is about kindergarten. Each year at the start of February, we are excited to welcome our families beginning their child's journey in Barrington schools through our kindergarten roundup process. This year, our kindergarten roundup will occur on Monday, February 3rd at each of our 8 elementary schools. And then we will have additional evening information sessions for our individual kindergarten district programs that exist throughout the district. I encourage our families to attend our roundup on February 3rd or one of those individual district program evening events. And I just want to reinforce for our community, you know, if any family has specific questions regarding the readiness of their child or the supports that their child may need, we have a lot of information. And clearly, this is our first year as a district offering full-day kindergarten and access to help support our students at a variety of readiness levels. They don't come to us all in the same manner, but we work really hard, especially in kindergarten, to figure out the right level of programming and supports for our kindergartners. So if our families have specific questions, in addition to those roundup events, I would encourage our families to reach out to our elementary principals and start those conversations so that our principals can start to understand the needs of some of the students that will be entering District 220. All right. Next, we had conversations this past fall around Title IX policies, and our conversations as administration and Board of Education, we had noted and promised to the community that we would continue to monitor, and if any updates occurred that we would bring those conversations back here to the board table on Thursday, January 9th, in a case of the state of Tennessee versus Cardona. The U.S. District Court in the Eastern District of Kentucky struck down the 2024 Title IX sex discrimination regulations that went into effect just at the start of this school year on August 1st, 2024. The court vacated the regulations nationwide, and that means that they are no longer in effect, those new 2024 guidance. So as a result, our district will revert back to the 2020 Title IX policies and guidance should we have a situation occur within our school district. We do not presently have any ongoing Title IX investigations as a school district. So in addition to using the guidance, I also want to make sure our board and community is aware that in addition, we will formally update our district policies back to the 2020 policies that existed prior to the new regulations at our next policy committee meeting, and then bring that back to the full board for conversation. So more to come on that. We recently learned that our district once again has received the meritorious budget award from the Association of the School Business Officials International. So according to ASBO, this distinction is a testament to our commitment to sound fiscal management and budgetary policies. I want to congratulate Sarah Lager and her entire team on their continued recognition and success for preparing our district budget at its highest level. So congratulations, Sarah. And I have one more slide this evening.
So sorry.
That's okay. Weather, right? This has been the topic that we've all been discussing. So I want to start with just, I was raised that when you don't meet expectations, you don't make excuses, but rather you take responsibility and apologize, and then you take steps to improve. And earlier this afternoon, I sent a message to our community expressing my apologies and offering additional insight into what occurred today, because our process did not reflect the timely communication that we have provided in the past. And so a written message, I believe, only conveys so much. So I felt it was important that our community actually hear my voice and hear from me directly tonight on this important topic. Our team has worked throughout the day today to review what occurred, and we have already identified ways to make improvements and build some different systems and redundancies and practices into our work moving forward. In addition, our review has revealed some information that we can actually utilize to ensure information is received by our families. For example, as we've reviewed the process and what went into our communications, we learned that in the last 30 days, over 800 individuals have selected to identify our district communications as spam when earlier messages went out to the community, and thus removing themselves from all communications, including emergency communications. So we learned that as we've been trying to uncover why did certain messages not go out, why was there delays in the timing of it and so forth, one of the things we learned that we had no idea that had occurred. So again, continuous improvement. We're going to continue. This is just within hours. Today we discovered something. We're going to work with our families to get them back in our system so that they're not missing messages. And that's just one example of things that our team is working on to identify ways that we can and will improve. And I just felt that it was important that our community knows that we understand the importance of timely communication and the disruption that it causes for our families, and we will work hard to restore that communication like we've been able to provide in the past, the rest of the school year and moving forward. So, and with that, that concludes my report, unless there's any questions from the board.
Just want to clarify, talking about kindergarten, since we got an email about that. Somebody who turns 6, summer of 2026, is not disqualified from enrolling in kindergarten in fall of 2026.
Right.
True statement, right?
Right, so it's, the state guidelines indicate 5 by September 1st or before for kindergarten, 6 by September 1st or before for first grade. So yes, there is some confusion in the community. We became aware of that, and that is really why I wanted to, one, annually, I mentioned that it's kindergarten enrollment. It's an exciting time. It's the start of a journey for so many of our families and so forth. So we highlight that. But Barry, that's what I was getting after, that if anyone has concerns about the age of entry, what the process is, how do we support kids and so forth, we welcome those conversations, and they're probably best served by those individual families working with our principals to really create the right plan and supports for those families. Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time? It was for for kindergarten, it's 5 and September 1st or after?
September 1st or before.
Oh, I'm sorry, before.
And then 6 for first grade on
September
September 1st
1st
or before.
Okay.
I know, it's a
Got it.
weird
I'm
way to
sorry.
say
Thank
it,
you.
but I hope we're all thinking the same thing. But
Yeah.
yes, those are the two age cutoffs that exist throughout the state and have been part of our, practices as a school district. But again, I think one of the things that makes our district great is that that's the starting point of the process. You need some guidelines. We follow the state expectations, but then we want to be able to work with our families to make sure that we have a full picture of what their students need. And I know there's been some concerns or communication around, is my child ready or not? Should we be making other decisions for my child? I want to start with those conversations. We have a number of supports, and as I mentioned, we have a full day program now where we can layer in and build in different ways to support the programming for our kindergartners. Does that help?
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Dr. Hillman,
Sure.
thank you for addressing the communication and timing around the weather. I know it was very, very stressful for our families and caused a lot of confusion. I appreciate the apology and taking it head on. I think the question I was getting over and over again today was, could we clarify what happened between the time the extreme cold warning went out at 3:30 and then our message at 6:58 a.m. to families? Was it entirely due to the Infinite Campus problems in terms of delivery? And if so, I know you said we're investigating and looking through. Is there a thought to maybe, okay, we need to blast this on social media, do alternate forms of communication, maybe at 5:30 a.m. or 6 a.m. continuously until people get it? Or like what, so could you explain, clarify a little bit more around that, and then maybe some of the initial thoughts? in case
Sure.
that happens again?
So the timing, we were working with our guidelines and continued to use our guidelines throughout the day yesterday. Continue to watch and monitor the National Weather Service updates to see if any conditions had changed or if the temps continued to drop, necessitating us to move from one level of our guidance, right, of an advisory to an actual extreme cold. We continue to monitor that up to, and I think the community is aware, past 10 o'clock, because we were sending out messages, because unprecedented, we had a fake message go out that was not from the school district, and our team was working after 10 o'clock to make sure we communicated again to our families at that time. So we continued to watch, Aaron, as far as a timeline, all the way, into those late evening hours, because we were already responding to something else. We then went to bed for a few hours and woke up early to realize that after a few hours of sleep, the National Weather Service, because the temps had continued to drop, had changed the status, which again necessitated us going back to our guidelines. As soon as we read that early morning message, our team started to work to put together our communication plan to go out to families. And that's where I've stated that the timing of that message, of the process starting for us to where families actually received messages, is much longer than normal. Normally, we make that decision around 5:30, 6 o'clock, and the message is out within minutes. That didn't happen. And that's where we're investigating right now to find what occurred, that those messages were delayed. Why did it take so long that some families received them earlier Some it took all the way up to almost 7 o'clock. Some didn't get them at all, as I was reporting on, that we're trying to investigate why did certain individuals not receive the messages. So that's the gap that I'm trying to gather information. I've only had a few hours to do it today, but we're already working hard to try to figure out how do we shore that up. If there is a problem with Infinite Campus's system, is there another method that we can use? And that's what I'm speaking to, redundancies. So if we realize one system isn't functioning and being as automated as it's behaved in the past, do we have another system that we can go to? Can we start to implement another method to get information out?
So the text messages run through the same,
And phone calls.
So text, phone calls, messages, that's all baked into that process. And obviously, we also experienced some challenges where text messages weren't going through to some individuals. Some were receiving it. Phone calls didn't go out because of the density of those messages, as far as just the system being able to process that. So there was a lot of concerns going on with the system that we were trying to identify this morning in that gap of time to try to gather as much information as we could as to why is it not working like it normally does. As you can imagine, there's a lot of phone calls going back and forth between our staff, our different departments are trying to investigate to figure out what is the cause of the problem and identify it, and then try to send an additional message in a different manner. There was a lot going on in the early morning hours. That's where in the past we haven't experienced that. But because we did this time, we're not okay with that. We're gonna look for ways to improve, identify, like I said, additional systems and so forth. So if one thing's not working, we can go to something else.
So we did initiate that process at around 5:30 or 6.
Yes.
Just that lag time took an
Yes.
hour plus.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was challenging for us to even understand why they weren't going out, because the system, I mean, this is not our first rodeo. We've actually implemented, just in the last few weeks, a number of messages where it's worked seamlessly, where we learned that Grove also, as an example, we had a busted water line and we had to quickly switch. We wrote messages, we sent them out using our normal systems, and they were out in minutes. We just did that again a week or so ago for lines. I mean, things have been very reliable, and we've been able to deliver on our community's expectation as well as our own to let families know as soon as possible. We ran into problems this morning. We're not making excuses, we're owning it, and we're looking for ways to improve.
Thank you.
Yeah.
and not that you're not doing enough, but also to assure the community, we are figuring out how.
Yes, thanks for bringing that up. I didn't mention that tonight, but I did mention it in the community-wide written letter that went out today. That's never happened before, of us having a situation like that in the middle of our communications. We have started, in addition to try to understand what happened with messages not going to people, we've also started to use our staff to investigate what occurred. Do we have any data breach? What email listservs were potentially utilized outside the district to do that type of mass communication that went out? As I indicated in the letter, we are working with Barrington Police Department. We met with officers today to file a report of what occurred and to start the investigation, not only as a school district with our resources, but also to start an investigation through the help of our local law enforcement. And so as soon as I know something more about that, I'll be right back here communicating to the community, because I think it's important our community knows what transpired with that, because they need to rely on our communication. And anything that deters from that causes problems, because obviously last night, like I said, I pulled the whole team back together after 10 o'clock to say, we're working again, and we need to get these messages out to everyone, because this can't just sit out there that there's a message that does not represent Barrington 220's official communication.
Something people were bringing up to me today was, it doesn't seem to match that initially we were gonna have school but no outdoor activities, but that would still mean kids standing at the bus stop, and that doesn't seem to match. And so I'm wondering if we need to relook at those policies, reevaluate them.
Yeah, absolutely. There is, I've been, Leah, also trying to help educate and inform our community about the existing policies, because all of the decisions that we were making along the way are consistent with what our procedures state. So, and that's why we linked them for parents. Now, I know not everybody clicks on them to look at. There's a whole host of things that occurred yesterday. We're on the phone with the fire department to make sure part of that advisory status that we were going to enter today in, of just bringing students in and remaining inside, it's dense. It's all on the website. If you click on the link and attachment, we don't take field trips. We don't put kids back outside or to other settings that we don't have control over the facilities. We contact the fire department to say if we have an emergency, we're not going to immediately evacuate students to outside. We will identify a location inside the school to move there's a whole host of things. So our policy states, and the weather conditions stated, that we were in that advisory, which means we have school based on the temperatures and the status from the National Weather Service. Once that changed overnight, then we moved to the next step, following our procedures, right? Now, if the board wants to direct the administration to revisit our procedures that we did follow and make adjustments, have lower thresholds versus the status that we were in, we are more than willing to have those conversations to make adjustments to if there's an interest in doing that. Does that make sense? That
It does.
If
It
we
does. And
feel
those are the
that-
questions I was getting, and I
Yeah.
didn't have the answers that you have at your fingertips. But it also, that's a visual that people are saying that doesn't seem to match. So, but there's more looking at it. And it's not on the agenda tonight, but it's something that's come up right now, so.
Yeah, of course.
You
Yeah.
know.
When you're in that -20 to -30 with the wind chill,
Yeah.
our current procedures say you come to school, and then we do everything about keeping you inside and so forth, but you do come to school. When you get over that, or the National Weather Service updates it to a warning, we make an adjustment. And so, I definitely think we can take a look at that if that's a direction we want to head as a community and change those thresholds.
I would say as you go through your investigation, bring back anything
Yeah.
that you guys talk through and
Okay.
you like to bring to us. Does that
I can
sound
do
fair?
that.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Again, we want to get it right.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is, we have, I think in the past, demonstrated, I hope, to our community that we understand that our community doesn't believe that we don't take that responsibility seriously enough, or that we're not trying to communicate early enough. We know all of the changes, the disruption, all the things that occur in our households. If I can make the decision early, for the past 2 years while I've been sitting in this role, I've made it early. Last night, I didn't have the ability to do that because our procedures didn't indicate the ability for us to make that shift at that time. As soon as I knew that, we moved forward, but we're going to be better at it.
Well, and I think other districts said the day before, we're not gonna have school. And their procedures are probably different, so it's something to think about.
Yeah,
In my
actually,
opinion, I
I'm
don't
looking
know.
at it for what's best for our district.
Yeah.
To clarify for the board, I'm on a group with every Lake County school,
Mm-hmm.
as well as our conference schools, 211 and 214. They all make their decisions. As of last night, there was 2 districts in Lake County that were going to do late starts. 2.
So I had wrong information.
You had wrong information,
I
and so
apologize.
did a lot of people.
I apologize.
Because I'm looking at a document where every superintendent is updated. We had 2.
Okay.
Many districts, as soon as that new guidance came out, shifted, like we did, because we were concerned about, now the weather has actually gone less, the National Weather Service has updated, our guidelines say this. Some districts didn't, Leah. 211 and 214, which are part of our athletic conference, ran school today. So they made that decision.
I apologize.
I'm going to make the decision for what's best for our district, but I do want to clarify, because I was hearing some of that same feedback of, no one's in school tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, but that's one piece of information. We make our decisions based on our guidelines and following the guidelines and the direction from the National Weather Service. So I just want to reassure the community again, more than anything, we leave this conversation with an appreciation that we are sorry that we weren't able to deliver on that, and we're going to work hard to try to figure out ways to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So much was on the cusp too. I know our procedure was, I think, up through -15, actual temperature -15. We would have school, and at that point it was -10. But then the National Weather Service had issued the extreme cold warning, so that changes our direction, right? So I think an investigation of the procedures,
Yeah.
timing, communication, I think that will all help, and look forward to recommendations based on that.
Absolutely.
Agreed. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
You're welcome.
Wickman. Thank you,
You're
Board. Next up is our consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. On our consent agenda this evening are minutes from January 7th, both open and closed. Several finance reports, the December reports for wage and payroll, treasurer report, and revenues and expenditures, and the January bill list, as well as a revised personnel report. Any questions or comments on those? All right, let's do a roll call.
Sandra Bradford,
Yes.
Leah Colister-Lazari,
Yes.
Steve Wang,
Yes.
Katie Karam, Aaron Chandang,
Yes.
Barry Altshuler.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Let us jump into our discussion topics before we get to our committee of the whole and budget planning.
Awesome. All right, so our first discussion item tonight is our Transform 220. This is our first presentation to the Board of Education and our community, and we are certainly so excited to be able to kick off the next phase of construction and new spaces for our students in District 220. And with that, I will turn it over to Josh and Sarah, who are going to lead us through the presentation.
The first.
I was trying to fill that while I was getting up there, Josh.
The first of many. So, thank you for the opportunity tonight to give just a brief update on the work that we have done thus far since the passing of the referendum in November, and the work that we're doing in the very near future relative to Transform 220. So with the passing of the $64 million bond referendum in November of 2024, we've set in motion a series of meetings to prepare for the successful execution of Transform 220. In late December, district administrators met with DLA Architects and Pepper Construction to discuss the Transform 220 project, including initial discussions of a timeline. Tonight, we will review the tentative timeline schedule for each project. The most recent meeting was our inaugural Transform 220 Steering Committee that occurred just last week. The timeline is up on the screen, and it was also included last week in your packet. But this is our tentative timeline of the 9 projects spanning 3 to 4 years. And what you'll notice is on the left, you'll see a series of black bars. That is our design period. That includes developing plans and reviewing concepts, resulting in the construction of documents. School board authorization will be required to move to the bid phase, which is the gray box. And that allows prospective bidders to obtain drawings, estimate, and submit bids for design. It also provides time for the construction team to analyze and make a recommendation for school board approval. And the final bar is the red bar, very exciting, that is the build bar.
This is what everybody's been waiting for.
We're waiting for it. Shovels in the ground.
So design, bid, and build. Common concepts that I know this board is also very familiar with. The build phase, which is the red bar, is the time needed to award contracts, purchase materials, construct. and once completed, turn over the facility to the school district for occupancy, including punch list items and closeout. Our expectation of substantial completion of each individual project coincides with either the start of the school year or at a semester break. While some projects, as you will notice on the timeline, extend beyond the start of the school year or extend beyond a mid-year semester break, this additional time that you will see during the build phase is really connected to additional closeout items and punch list items. But again, our expectation is that these projects would be completed prior to the start of the school year or after a semester break. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions related to the timeline that I can answer or Sarah can answer.
I know we are keeping the current auditorium open while we build the new auditorium. And then the conversion of that. So is that all lumped into the community auditorium tab?
No.
Okay.
So the community auditorium needs to happen, and then you'll see as you go down a little bit,
Is it the
then we're
music
doing the
rooms?
music rooms, which is the renovation of the current auditorium.
Okay.
And then we'll be doing the STEAM labs, which is the renovation of the music.
Gotcha. That's what I figured. But
Yep.
Thank you.
That's why we see the red bars at different timeframes.
Right.
No, it's kind of hard to see this, so.
Yeah, it's a little bit small. And before we get too far, I want to just introduce our architect and our construction manager, Lance, Carrie, and Steve, who are here to support us on our very first board presentation for Transform 220. So thank you guys for being here, and thank you for helping us get started on this.
And this is on our website, so people who can't see this.
Well,
access
We're gonna
this,
get
right?
there, Barry.
Oh,
Hold
okay.
on one
Sorry.
second.
I just don't want people to have to strain too much.
It will be.
Yeah.
it will be, we didn't want to get ahead of the discussion tonight.
Sorry.
So
We
we're,
never want to get ahead of your
So-
bosses, Barry. We
I know.
want to make sure
Keep
you
my
get
mouth
a
shut,
chance
sorry.
to see it first, absolutely.
so we're looking at a March 2028 open date for the new auditorium?
Well, it would coincide with generally January for a break, but yes, we're in 20.
The red bars also include like any follow-up items.
Mhm.
So
Punch
it might
lists.
not reflect exactly when it'll be occupiable, where we can have an occupancy.
And the person that's really gonna help us get there is our golden hard hat,
Oh,
Ms.
wow.
Tara. I can't forget that she's here as well.
Awesome.
Exciting.
So when you look at it, it is kind of easy to see that all the gray bars are all at the same time frame.
Yep.
So could you just talk to that quickly?
Yeah. So that's in our next slide. So you will
Oh.
notice
We're gonna have here.
that, so not only the gray bars.
It's
but-
actually awesome for me because we've done this for 4 years, and look at the work on the board. You're like, I know what we're doing. We know how to do this. Like, it's great.
Sorry.
No,
You
it's
can
great.
answer as you get to it. for sure.
And if I don't, please bring it back.
Don't worry.
So one of the things that we noticed right away was that all the design bar, time frame is January 25th to January 26th for all 9 projects. So to accomplish and meet this timeline, we have really begun in earnest full meeting schedule that includes already calendared meetings and a plan to add additional meetings as the project design teams begin to meet. And so the slide that you see is just kind of a flavor of the rhythm of meetings that have already been scheduled, from the monthly steering committee that I mentioned earlier, to weekly internal project status meetings, and then also weekly status meeting with our project partners from Pepper and also with DLA. Across the bottom, though, is really our next layer of work as we really start to understand what the design process will look like and start to bring those design teams together for each one of the 9 projects. So again, go back to the timeline. Thank you, Sarah. You'll see along the left-hand side, we have a relatively short timeline in order to accomplish the design for all 9 projects. And then Sandra, to your point, also we have a very similar, we have the same bid process timeline for each one of those projects. So if you want, Sarah, if you want to talk a little bit about the bid process.
Sure, so there's a lot of value, one, because these projects are so intertwined, to be doing this design work at the same time so that, you know, everything is following the sequence. Also, there's value financially in bidding these projects together by having our trades have an opportunity to see what's coming up. They can bid these things and we can have a better financial value, which will be, of course, a positive for,
We like that?
yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. So it's twofold, and I'm sure that our partners could probably come up with a number of other reasons why there is value in doing that, but ensuring our projects are streamlined and we're designing things that make sense together, as well as the financial piece, are really important to us.
And just the final piece on this slide is the ongoing meetings. It's one thing to have meetings, but the important piece is that we're receiving ongoing feedback. That was central to the success of Bill 220, and that will be a core component of Transform 220 as we move forward. So,
Did you say that again? I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
So, I'm sorry. Importantly, as we move forward, we know the importance of ongoing robust communication. It was centrally, important to build 220, and it will be just as important as we move forward with Transform 220.
So lots of opportunities to provide input, feedback loop, refine, and continue to work through that process, both with our staff, with our board, with our community. Very similar to what we found it very successful getting individuals, lots of eyes, lots of perspective involved in that design phase, so that whatever the outcome is that we build, it's really been informed by a variety of our stakeholders and community.
So for example, like the middle school science rooms is something that we talked about, maybe we might be able to get done a little bit earlier, but we really want to go through a robust design timeframe to make sure we get all the input. I mean, I know when I went, I think it was the station for that communication, I started hearing ideas about this and that, but we really want to make sure we get all those stakeholders involved
Right.
in here and get their feedback before we put shovels to the ground.
Absolutely.
Makes sense.
Is part of this communication and looking at, reevaluating those additions at the middle school, and if they're meeting the expectation that we had before we built them and when we toured and visited, and now people are visiting us, and with the science rooms, it's science, so we know what those teachers are gonna be in there, but with those rooms, it was like, we didn't know who was gonna be in those rooms, and then it became sixth grade, and so it was a little bit of okay, did we train the right people? Who are the people in those rooms? And is the whole school using those rooms, kind of thing? Like, do we do some looking back on that and reevaluating to make sure that those are working and that this will be more planned? That's not the right
Yeah,
word, but
we're
like
gonna take-
thoughtful and,
Yeah, I
you
know
what I'm saying.
exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
We're gonna take advantage of, we now locally have more insight into some of the designs that exist in the middle school additions, right? We're gonna draw upon that. When we did the work, as you alluded to, we were visiting sites, we were looking at research, that we used a number of things to inform, but we didn't have the ability to have a full grade level configuration. So yes, individuals that are currently using the space, that have insight into just the flexible, what works, what are the best examples, what are we taking full advantage of, what do we not have that we wish we would have built in. So that's gonna be a piece of it, but then also these are for science, that we wanna make sure we get our science educators and research related to science instruction, right? Because we want these rooms to meet our needs now and in the future. We're gonna pull all of that, so all those different sources, but we are gonna take advantage of the fact that, yes, we now have the ability to actually lean into our staff a little bit more, because we have those spaces and we've been able to use them with students. Yeah. Including student voice of what works, where do we see you, and how you're using it, and getting the middle school voice to help inform that as well.
Because I don't want to make more work for you, but probably the high school too. How is the use of the atrium working? How is the new cafeteria working? you know, it's early, but it's still like, we wanna make it the best for our students that we can. And we can't, you know, there's not unlimited money, we can't make everything perfect, but to make, if we've got these spaces, to use them to their fullest, to the best use for our kids, right?
Absolutely.
So, because there's mixed feedback, it's always that way, you know?
Yeah. Well, and you get in a space, and then you also start to use it and learn how you're using it. So, you know, there's no replacement to that. Like when you get in a space, how you use it, where people start to find benefits, we may adjust. Hopefully, we're designing them to meet the variety of needs, but we also will learn along the way and then make adjustments as well.
Okay, so we are at ground zero on our referendum thermometer for spending. So the dollars are generally added to our thermometer when they've been committed, which means that you have awarded a bid, for example. So we are still early in the process, and of course, we are at $0 committed right now. I just want to make note that the bond issuances, so when we're issuing a bond, that's not connected to this thermometer that we're looking at. This is truly about the spending that we're doing on the project. So the bond that we issued in December would not play into this. Since that was so early and kind of out of sequence from our last referendum, I just wanted to mention that. We don't have a thermometer for that.
We want to see the progress on the shovels to the ground.
Yes,
The design
exactly.
And the shovels to the ground. I know we'll see more before we get shovels to the ground.
Yeah.
Let me ask this, do you anticipate 2 more tranches or just 1 more with respect to bonds now?
It, likely two. It
Okay.
kind of depends on any other leases that we might engage in. If we don't engage in any additional leases over the next several months, PMA might recommend that we take advantage of another under 15 million to take advantage of the arbitrage. So likely a possibility of 2.
And finally, in addition to ongoing board presentations, we'll continue to be transparent and open regarding the ongoing work and the process related to Transform 220. So as you know, we now have a dedicated website on our district website relative to our most recent initiative, which is Transform 220. There's not a ton in there right now, but there will be. So thank you, Sarah, for launching it. You'll see the 9 projects. You'll see the 9 projects along the right-hand side, and just kind of some overall information about Transform 220. But as we move forward, we'll continue to update this site with presentations and timelines and all those good things. So that has worked for us in the past with various initiatives. So this will be an aligned approach in terms of communication, even beyond board presentations. So with that concludes my my update. Unless, Sarah, do you have anything else to add?
So maybe one more quick question. As we update the website, you know, as we showed the timeline, it didn't show when the students will be able to occupy that space.
Mhm.
Will we also be able to include an anticipated date for when the middle school science rooms, auditorium, I'm sure is on everybody's mind, when we might expect to have students occupy those spaces?
Yeah, we've had some very recent conversations about how to sort of showcase that on a timeline. But as you know, we're very early on in the process, so identifying, a month. But as I shared earlier, our expectation is that these spaces would be, ready to go for the start of the school year or at a semester break.
Yeah, and that's something like.
A date for a date is good too.
It is. We've put now the different projects on the website, and then there's gonna be a page dedicated to each, We could add some narrative language now that we have the general timeline. I'm sensing from the board feedback, there's no concerns with the timeline or adjustments, but I don't wanna, before we leave and go to the next agenda item, I wanna make sure that is the case, right? And then we can look at those individual pages and say, for like middle school science classrooms, anticipated, substantial completion, students moving into those spaces, fall of fill in the blank. The auditorium, I know, is, a lot of people are interested. How does that line up with concerts, musicals, plays, I get all, we totally are mindful.
Board meeting, board
So,
meeting.
Right. So we can do some of that work on the individual pages as well, so it's on a timeline graphic, it's in narrative form, we know we need to communicate to our community. Everyone's been waiting. This team has worked so hard in a very short turnaround to get us to the point where we can answer that first question that is everyone is asking, when do we get these things? We tried tonight to be able to deliver that because obviously a lot of this work is connected to our budget planning and our other timeline and facilities, which we're going to go to in a little bit. So I guess I will bring that question then. Is it okay to get some feedback from the board? Timeline?
We're just very excited. We're very excited.
Of course.
We are too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we
yeah,
are
we're
too.
just like sooner, but reality.
It's like air conditioning in the gym, man. I just want it right now.
Even today?
Wait a minute, ask
Stay
that question again.
tuned. Stay tuned. There are some updates there, so
summer.
stay tuned.
Too bad we can't capture the cold air for summertime.
There you go. Is everybody comfortable with this general
Great.
timeline?
Considering we just passed this referendum over 2 months ago, we're
Right.
really
Thank you.
doing great. We're good. shape.
Sounds like an opportunity for more green check marks
Yes.
eventually.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll have to be like a
Victoria's
green
budget.
Lego piece.
Yeah.
Ooh, a green Lego.
Ooh,
And
I like that.
And I really like the thermometer too, so we can see where we are.
Yeah,
See the progress
it does.
it's taken.
And I think it's a little different, but it's a lot of the elements. We're able to draw upon a lot of the experience of the leadership of this board being familiar with the process, our administrative team, and certainly our partners. I really do. I want to thank Stephen Wright and Carrie Matlock from DLA and Lance Trish from Pepper Construction for taking the time tonight and working so hard with our team to get us to a point where we could share this with the community, because we did have conversations about those were some of the efficiencies and things that were baked into some of the conversations we were having. So, thank you. Is there anything you guys would like to share? Because we're going to be seeing more of each other now for the next several years, so tonight's the kickoff.
We're very excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. We are too.
We're excited to have you. All right, so hearing no other comments, it looks like we've got a timeline we can publish,
Okay.
and
Thank you, board.
appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right, so one other discussion topic before we jump into budget planning.
Correct.
Related.
So next up, we've got some individuals that are going to come up to the table and join us for long-range capital planning. Speaking of green check marks, this was part of our strategic plan, so excited to have our team provide this update to the board tonight as well.
Well, we are returning as promised from our August meeting where we talked about long-range capital planning, and we made some promises to the board, and we're here to talk more about that. So as always, we're starting with our mission statement of empowering personal excellence in every learner, and as Dr. Winkleman mentioned, this aligns directly with our stewardship priority, specifically the infrastructure facilities strategic objective, which states, in alignment with other strategic priorities, maintain and develop facilities infrastructure for present and future needs to empower learning. So we've talked a lot over the last couple of years about long-range planning. And it's taken us some time to get here because we've sort of changed the process on exactly what that meant to us and what we needed to be most successful. So Nicole's going to talk a little bit about what are we doing now to get to the point that we're making recommendations for our facility improvements. What have we created, which is a new inventory tool for the district, which is then guiding our long-range facility planning. And that's going to help us not only maintain our buildings, but be really thoughtful in thinking forward about the work that needs to be done in our buildings and how we can accomplish that. So I'll start a little bit talking about things you've seen and things you already know, that we have a lot of space to maintain in our district, 12 schools, transition facility, our admin office, and a number of vacant parcels. We have over 200 acres of property and about 1.4 million square feet under roof, which, as you might remember, equates to about 700 homes if you are internalizing this to your own personal experience. So our buildings are aging, as you know. We've done a lot of great things over the last several years that we want to keep maintaining and keep looking great. And that, of course, takes a lot of forethought in our planning, and it takes a financial investment to be able to do. And you might remember that the replacement of our district is approximately $779 million, which is a very large number to be considering. So as we talk a little bit about the great work that we're doing, we're then going to get into the tool that we've created and how that's sort of going to guide us in our thinking process to move forward with our capital planning. So I'll let Nicole talk a little bit about what she does now with her team to make decisions about capital projects, which we sort of interchangeably use the phrase summer projects or capital projects, so we can kind of link those together here.
So our current capital process includes a few different factors. We take building input into account. We use maintenance records and failure rates with the input of our maintenance team. We also use some third-party assessments on all of the areas of our buildings and properties. So we do those things now. We will continue to do those things going forward as well. We prioritize our projects each year based on the needs as well as our funding that's available to complete projects. Once those projects are identified, we bring them to the facilities committee for approval and then eventually any bids to the full board. So all of those things we'll continue to do, but as Sarah was mentioning, that did lead us to the point where we needed to develop a new tool so we had better long-term planning. So our new tool has taken some time. As you know, there's been a lot that's gone into the development of it. We partnered with DLA Architects of Berg Engineering and did a thorough assessment of our district from top to bottom. The district staff was involved, and we looked at everything from mechanical systems all the way down to faucets in every bathroom. So literally everything was inventoried in the entire district. We received all of that data, and then we took it and analyzed it, and we needed to format it into a tool that was useful for our district. So it took a lot of work manipulating the data and getting it into a place where we could make it useful for us as well.
I'll just sneak in for a second. So Dr. Bine came and talked a lot about this with us over the last couple of years, and we talked about a number of different tools, a number of different approaches and methodologies. So that's sort of what has evolved to get us to this moment that we're in here. So as Nicole mentioned, that it's taken a lot of meetings with Carrie. Thank you so much for all the time that your team has put into this. And Nicole spent a lot of time in the buildings. My joke was kind of, you look down at the floor and you look all the way through the roof. That's what's evaluated. So everything from the ground up and beyond is what is part of this tool and now available for us to see.
And this tool actually functions as a living tool that continues to grow and change as we grow and change. And as we update things in the district, for example, if we were to add air conditioning to the gym at the high school, that would then go on the equipment list. So we would, if we add a new community auditorium, all those things continue to go into the document or into the tool. So it's a living document that we can continue to use ongoing for years to come and help us better long-term plan and better prioritize our projects over time.
And this goes well beyond 10 years. It goes beyond 20 years. I think we have things on there for 2072 is the furthest year out. So
wow.
we are looking far, far into the future. So the result of the tool is not only the tool itself, but it gives us data on what we're looking ahead to. So we need an idea of what's coming. Of course, we're talking about that all the time. We always have an idea of that, but this sort of puts it into a little more digestible data. I don't know if 13.5 million is more digestible, but it's easier for us to, of course, predict and plan for. You're going to see a variety of, I don't want to say peaks and valleys, but it's not a nice, clean, flat line that you're going to see here, and that's what you expect. We're, of course, doing work at different paces over the years, which means that we're going to have different needs year after year. So I'll let Nicole talk a little bit about what happens in 27-28 when we have a $13 million year.
So what this is representative of is our tool and the useful life of everything that's evaluated and goes into the tool. So, for example, in 27-28, there is about $5.5 million worth of flooring in there. But that is because that's its projected end of useful life. Does that mean we need to spend that money in that year? Not necessarily. We're going to continue to use those capital planning tools that we use now and do an evaluation of all of these items that come up to their useful life in those years, do an assessment, and if it's still in a condition that we can continue to maintain it and use it, we won't replace it at that time. We'll push it to a different year in the future, but all of the things, all the $13.5 million, the $5.2 million, every year we'll take an assessment of everything that's projected for its end of useful life or in that cycle.
Just like we do now, we're selecting projects based on the funds that are available. We'll continue to do that. And our intention here that you're seeing 5 years was not by accident. We talk each year about a 5-year projection. We do a 5-year forecast each year right now, today, tonight. So our intention is to sort of align these processes, to have an opportunity to talk about resource allocation at the time that we are talking about our 5-year forecast. So here's a view of 5 years out as we continue to talk about that exact thing this evening. So we will continue to do that on an annual basis. We'll talk about what's coming up, what do we think doesn't maybe need to be done in 27-28 that can be pushed into a future year, and then we'll continue to make recommendations based on the funds that are available and the projects that need to be done. I will also mention there's years out from this that the bar is much, much, much lower. So in some years, yes, that is, yes, you know, we have had a very consistent $2.5 to $3 million projection for our summer projects. This might lend to a little more flexibility in how we're spending those dollars. If we have a larger year coming up and we have a small year behind us, maybe we're spending a little less one summer and we're spending more in a future summer, and this helps us plan for that. This chart here is sort of an adjustment to one that you have seen a few times. So you've seen the chart that shows our investment of the referendum that we just did, the investment of repairs and maintenance, which comes out of our operations and maintenance budget, and investment of our capital, which we generally refer to as our summer projects. And if you remember, there were 2 bars on the chart that we were seeing before based on the model that Jen had evaluated, and we came up with our threshold of what's the low end and the high end of what we should be spending based on the recommendation of the model. So this is showing consistent spending if we were to make no changes other than CPI over the next 5 years to our current spending. And then the dotted line is based on the model what the recommended spending is. So you can see the variation between where we are and where we would love to be. And just a reminder that our capital investment is generally based on issuing DSEB, which we've had the fortune of not doing over the last couple of years. So it would either be issuing DSEB or pre-funding with a surplus that we have had the benefit of, but generally are not anticipating in future years. So as I mentioned, this process we'd like to align with our committee of the whole, with our 5-year forecast planning, reviewing what we have coming up over the next 5 years for our capital needs. We will update our new inventory, our new tool, consistently throughout the year. So we'll be adding our AC in the main gym, for example, and any other things that are replaced or repaired or added to the district. And then we will continue to bring project recommendations to the facilities committee in the spring. What questions can we answer?
I just want to say thank you for this work, because I think the board and the community has been asking for us to have a better plan for budgeting for our facilities. And this gives us a strong, clear view of, you know, are 5 air conditioners all gonna go in like 5 years? Or what kind of things are we gonna need to budget for? And so it's very responsible, and it seems like it's been an awful lot of work, and I appreciate that, and I think the community does too. And then, you know, as a board, we're gonna have to figure out where we find the funding, you know. But this is a good step, and sorry I interrupted. I was so excited that some of the years were not 13 million. They weren't on the chart. I was like, woo, okay. But yeah, and I think you've explained it in the past that, you know, it's like your home. You look and you say, how old is my roof? How old is my plumbing? You know, how long can the ugly floors stay in my kitchen that I don't like, but are they gonna be functional, you know? So this is kind of, it makes sense, you know, and that's a way to explain it that I think makes a lot of sense. So I think this is really good work, and I'm glad I didn't have to do it. I'm glad you did. And this will help us plan, so thank you.
Thank you for saying that. And the thing I did not mention on the $13 million year is there are always more projects than there is money. We know that, that's expected. So when you saw that, I'm sure you gasped, but we expected to see those things because we know that that's just like in a home. There's more things that you'd like to do, more things that you'd like to upgrade than you have funds for.
So you guys have been really good about prioritizing, and you've really made the numbers, the amount of money that we've given you so far, you've stretched it the best you can, but the bottom line is, it's not enough. What we've done over the last 10 years or longer is not the model that we need to follow, and, you know, our committee of the whole is going to discuss where this money's going to come from, but the bottom line is we need more money in our capital projects and our maintenance fund.
Would it be fair, would it be fair to say that, you know, because every year is a little bit different in your forecast, if we took the average of the 5 years, which I think is right around 9 million, 8.89, would it be fair that it would put us in a more comfortable position around facilities if we were to average that allocation every year?
Definitely that number is rather close to the recommendation on the next slide with the dotted line, or maybe the slide before, sorry. That is.
Can you put it up so we can know?
Oh, sure,
which
yeah,
slide
I'm
you're
so
talking
sorry,
about?
I'm pointing. The dotted line, in the first year is about the average of what you're seeing on this chart, but as with everything, it escalates with CPI. So the model that we're using includes an increase in DSEP every year. It includes an increase in our operations and maintenance, repair and maintenance budget. It assumes an increase each year. So yes, that's sort of where we're starting, and then it's increasing. Now, $9 million every year for a number of years would certainly be much more than the 2.5 to 3 that we've been investing, certainly, but that's pretty in line with the recommendation.
So the recommendation is to increase from 2.5 to 3 to 4.2 to 5 annually, correct? Make sure that we're all, I'm reading things right.
Yes.
I believe that was in the memo. Is that accurate?
I believe so, yeah, without it being right in front of me, I apologize.
Right here, 4.2 to 5 is what's in the memo. So that's where you'd like us to get to this evening as we budget. That's your recommendation.
That's our
In order to be able to make the investments that we need every summer. Well, typically we do them in the summer because that's when it's least disruptive to our students, right?
And then the other half of the promise is we're not gonna ask for another referendum for a very, very long time, because we're gonna budget for some of these things.
Thank you, Leah.
Yes.
That would include these facilities, like a referendum wouldn't include.
Right, we're
Because
gonna
we're
maintain our
already
buildings
out paying for it.
annually better, so that we're not asking for a referendum for a longer time period, is what we're trying to communicate with our community as a board. If I don't wanna speak for all of you, but I know we've talked about this before.
Yep.
At the risk of not getting too deep in the weeds here, I'm noticing that you have repairs and maintenance and capital separately, but there's a threshold for something to qualify as capital, correct? Like there's a dollar amount.
Correct. The capital that you're seeing here is generally what we call summer projects. So repairs and maintenance is coming from the operations and maintenance budget, whereas capital is coming from the capital fund.
So if we have like a minor equipment replacement, would that fall into repairs and maintenance?
Yes, generally.
Okay.
We're always doing repairs and maintenance, and we are doing replacements throughout the year.
Like
What-
a water line at Lines
Correct, yes.
unexpectedly is the gray.
Okay,
What's
okay.
coming out of the capital projects fund is approved by the board. Might be an
Sure.
easy way to sort of draw that
Okay,
distinction.
but there's no other, replacement or equipment type needs that are not reflected in this forecast. Is that a fair statement?
No, there's always more that needs to be done than we have funds for, but if you're just looking at the pink and the gray, for example, that is what we would be spending if we had no change to what we're currently doing.
Sure, right. Understood.
So there's more projects that could be done beyond what you're seeing here.
So maybe this is not the right slide, because the prior slide showed, what was it, 13.5 or something?
Mhm.
Like that in terms of capital projects. How does the maintenance then, or I'm sorry, I should say, how does the repairs and maintenance budget change? Because obviously we want to try to, I don't know what the number is, right? But I'm assuming it's, call it $2,500 to qualify as capital. Everything else would be considered an operating expense. That's all taken into account in your math. Is that accurate?
Well, I'll just make one comment before Nicole speaks. So anything over $5,000 is considered capital in
So
our
5,000.
accounting structure.
Okay.
That doesn't necessarily mean it's being paid out of the capital projects fund. We do capital projects within the operating budget as well.
Okay.
So the real distinction essentially between the gray and the pink would be, is it coming out of our operating funds or is it coming out of capital projects?
Okay, but in other, but the
But we
reality.
are doing capital projects, and they might be unexpected throughout the year out of the operating budget. I'll let you talk a little about.
That's exactly what I was
Yeah.
gonna say. I was just gonna define how we categorize a capital with the $5,000. Just to reiterate, we have an operations budget where we are doing daily operations, repairs, maintenance, break fix, things like that. There are capital replacement, like piping at lines that needs to be replaced.
Sure.
That is a capital improvement. So there is a difference between what we're spending daily in break fix, repairs and maintenance out of the operating budget versus what we're spending as a capital expense in the operating budget. So there are differences there.
And there are things in this 13 million, for example, that will be accomplished through the operations and maintenance budget.
Okay,
Large,
so
not large.
everything is under here, not just things that are $5,000 and over, is what you're telling me.
Painting is on here, for example.
Perfect.
So, yes.
Just
there-
want to make sure there's not going to be any
yes.
surprises where, obviously the line is something different, right? We can't forecast
Steve, I
that.
think it's great you're asking these questions because we're introducing a new tool we
Yes.
haven't
Right.
had before, and I think it's very important for the board to get into the nuance of how this is all fitting together, because this is a real benefit to our community.
Okay.
To have something like this, and certainly the board's leadership is going to be warranted as we're having this conversation. So clarify away.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate that, thank you. Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this appropriately. And then, okay, and the other concern I was probably going to bring up was just, I would assume that any sort of, because again, if it's all capital and non-capital that could fall through on the operating side, then I'm not worried about bundling. So in other words, things that wouldn't hit the threshold because they're under $5,000, you've captured in here as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, for example, we talked about how this inventory includes mechanical systems that are hundreds of thousands of dollars, as well as a faucet, which is
Perfect,
much
okay.
less than $5,000
Yes,
because
hopefully.
we're definitely not spending that much on our faucets. Thank you.
And
For the cold, we're not spending that on our
No.
faucets.
Not to belabor, I just thought of something that the repair and maintenance that we're doing from our operations and maintenance budget is also extending the life of some of these things as well. So it might extend the life to the point that we don't have to replace it in that $13 million year, for example.
So just, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, I guess, on this one either, but when you do that, break, fix, replace, fix analysis, what type of assumptions do you use? Like, are you trying to say we want to extend it for a certain period of time, so on a present value, or?
No, this is
we're
really just
avoiding
based on our
cost?
budget and our spending, knowing that some of the funding that's in this sequence here is
Yeah.
going to help extend the life and may even replace some of the things that are in this one.
Sure. Let me ask the question maybe differently. If it's let's call it a $500 item, but we can spend $100 each year to replace it, or I'm sorry, to maintain it. Do we look at, do you do any sort of discounting to say like $500 in the future is more like, on a present value basis, it's more like $400, and because we're now timing out each of these cash flows over the next 5 years to keep it for an additional 5 years instead of replacing it, we're now going to PV that back too, or how do you do that analysis? I'm just curious.
So that's something we actually do in the Buildings and Grounds Department on a daily basis. Anytime that we have an item that needs repair or needs maintenance, we're evaluating, does it make sense to make that repair? Or do we need to look at it and put it on our capital projects list in the near future, right? Like, take a flush valve, for example.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna check and see if it's not working, is the wiring bad, is it battery operated, whatever the issue is, do we fix that little part or piece, do we change the wiring, or do we have to replace the whole flush valve? If a coil breaks on a mechanical unit, are we replacing the coil, or is that unit coming due this summer and we need to think about replacing the whole unit? We just did this for some boilers in our district. The boilers needed some repair work done, we needed to put new tubes in them. So we assessed the value of the replacement of the tubes versus the life of the boiler. And it made more sense for us to do the tube replacement because the life of the boiler was so far out. It doesn't make sense to us to replace the boiler now and lose that life, the value of the remaining life on that unit. So we are doing this daily in our department with everything that comes up.
Okay, understood. Great, thank you.
Well, and to your point, it's a living document too, so obviously it's not perfect. Like, there are gonna be things that come up, and so it can be literally changed at all.
Yeah,
So
of course.
none of this is set in stone, given the fact that, I mean,
Yeah, I
can't
think-
predict everything.
I think the real benefit is that flexibility in the living document part of this, rather than, we had good information in the past, but it was contained to a snapshot in time. And it didn't evolve and change and be dynamic where our team can be updating it and making adjustments. And then the benefit of bringing that to this conversation annually in 5-year, timeframes that coincide with some of our forecasting as a district. That is huge. That is a huge accomplishment from something our community identified in 2022 with our strategic plan. And I know we heard loud and clear over the past year as we've been trying to also address the concerns of the community of monitoring, maintaining, but also the investment, and is that keeping up with the ability for us to preserve our facilities and keep them knowing the dollars don't go as far. So it's a real benefit. That flexibility and that living document piece, I think, is one of the real benefits to our district.
You know what, I'm sorry, actually, one more question too. Agreed. This is, the replacement timing is based on accounting useful life, is that correct?
Based on what?
Accounting useful life? So in other words, you mentioned floors needing to be replaced in 2028. We're assuming that floors have a useful life of, let's call it 25 years. So therefore, it's now hitting in 28, right?
Yes.
But to your point, the actual useful life could be something north of 25 years. Okay.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So everything is based on accounting standards, and then we'll adjust as needed on an annual basis.
Exactly.
And then as far as the tool goes, to Katie's point, then I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the $5 million that's being projected for the next school year, if we only spend a percentage of that residual now gets pushed to the following school year, or
Correct.
okay,
Yes. Either it gets pushed out to the useful life we've now determined.
or a new useful life.
Or
Yes,
next
thank you.
year, yes, and then what we did spend is pushed out into the variety of years that it would have a useful life for.
Okay, and do we have a reserve then for? I guess we have the fund balance.
Projects fund?
Yeah, just in case we have like an emergency. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Which we tapped into a little bit, obviously,
Sure.
right, to make some of those decisions in August for some of the projects.
Just to be clear, when it says annually in March, project recommendations, that's for the summer.
Following summer.
Like this March will be summer of '26.
Exactly
We've
right.
already decided what we're doing in summer of 2025.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Because we got to design and go out to bid and all that kind of stuff. So.
Well, if we
just
do it
talked about-
sooner, we save more money, right?
Right,
Mhm.
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. You were on an earlier timeline for our summer projects than we were a few years ago so that we can go out to bid sooner.
Appreciate all of this hard work to get us to where we are. It'll be a very useful tool for a long time in order for us to evaluate. And appreciate any extension of useful life as much as possible.
Sure.
Which I know we've done. We have a long history of doing that, so.
We have, yeah, we really, and that's a credit to the maintenance. If you put more care into it, you get more life out of it, and that's where the value of our team, it's why Nicole has a golden hard hat, because we do try to work on those things. No, I'm serious. I mean, your department does need recognition for that,
Yes.
because there's a lot of schools that, they wear faster than others because we're not doing that ongoing maintenance and so forth. And so we have, I mean, look at our turf, one of our largest investments. The initial purchase was a life expectancy of 10 years, but through the care of that, we got 12 years out of
12
it.
or 13?
Yeah, I think we got 2 extra years where other districts didn't have that. And that's, again, attributed to we work hard to maintain our facilities and do the things along the way necessary to get as much value out of them. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. I was thinking about the turf too. So thanks to community for helping us keep that turf.
Yeah.
And longevity of life too. There's reasons
Right.
we've got rules and things like that.
100.
How to use
Yeah.
how to use the turf and so forth, so.
Yeah.
Appreciate everybody's help. All right, are we ready to move into budgeting? As we leave, though, I just want to make sure we've got the numbers right. 4.2 to 5 is our
Yeah, I did.
goal.
Do you just mind if I look at my memo really fast?
Yes. You can correct us as we.
No, the allocation.
No, but it's good. I know why you're trying to clarify that, because it's a target for us for the next conversation.
For the next
to know
conversation,
that
yeah.
We're looking at the same target. And just green check mark coming your way,
Thank you.
just to be clear.
Yes.
Delivered on that one.
Yeah,
So 4.2.
thank you.
In FY '26, and then it escalates beyond. So our initial goal, when Dr. Bine was talking about this way back when, was to get to a $6 million investment. And that would be, if we were to increase the same amount each year, would be in 2030. So in '26, yes, the recommendation is 4.2.
And that would get us to the dotted line starting point.
So what I think I just heard you say is that it's an extra $1 million to $2 million every year and for the next 5 years.
No, it ends up being about 300,000 additional every year.
From what?
Well, if we went to 4.2 million, that would be an additional 1.2 million in FY '26, and then it's 300,000 each year if we were to do what is on the screen, which is a aggressive goal.
So 4.2 plus 300,000. In the
Correct.
second year,
Yes.
and the third year,
4.5 plus another 300.
Mm-hmm.
the next year.
Yes.
4.8 plus another
Picture for
300.
myself.
Okay. That's helpful. And that's the dotted line.
That's the dotted line.
In other words, once you've added it, the assumption is it remains and you're just continuing to add on to it, not some of the fluctuations we've saw where we've done one-time contributions. This is a evergreen contribution in order to meet that goal. It's a little bit of a shift of some of the decision-making we've done at this meeting in the past, right?
When we shared in August, we shared sort of every year we were going up about 0.5. Of course, we're doing more in summer of '25 than we had done before, but then each year we were sort of going up to get to that 6 million mark in 6 years from our.
And that's with D-sub factored in every year, correct?
So in 5 years, it would be when we would reach that, just over 6 million.
In 2030,
2030.
maybe it's 6 million.
Okay, everybody following?
Yep.
Might be good to draw us a picture. After this
I
meeting.
see what you're doing. Yeah.
Yes, I
Sarah and I
can,
will work to give that broken down so the board can see that visually.
I just want to make sure it's very clear
Yes.
that this, what we're talking about tonight is going to get us through the next year, but we're going to be doing this again to get another 300,000.
Every year.
And again, it's
And
every
again
year.
and again,
Yeah.
until 2030.
And that's based on everything lining up like it is. Just, there may be a year that something else occurs where we need to make a different
Absolutely,
decision. So-
absolutely. Which is,
So if we put aside 5 million and we only have to spend 4 million that summer, we would take that million and put it into capital projects.
exactly, that's,
So we're ready for this 6 million the next year.
exactly. That's kind of what I was talking about, how the
Ebbs and
years
flows.
fluctuate, so, I mean, we can always find more projects to do early, but let's hold on to the dollars and use them as we need them, so one year might be higher than another.
So we can get extra credit if we get to 5.3 tonight.
Yeah.
Well,
There'd be an
there is
ambitious
a
goal.
compounding effect of it as
Right.
well.
Absolutely.
Right? So.
You know, we
yes.
are overachievers, right? So, all right.
Okay, welcome to our Committee of the Whole 5-year forecast. We have hit the moment of the evening, so.
Exciting.
Presentation.
Oh, yes, thank you. I do that every time.
I said dun dun dun.
Dun, 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 yeah.
So if anything is aligning with our Framework 220 and our mission statement, it is certainly the budget and what we are spending to educate our students. So to get us started, I want to talk a little bit about our revenue and expenditures. I'm starting with the FY25 budget, as that is our most recent funding for the district. So our operating revenues, very consistent with what we would expect to see. 88% of our operating revenues come from local funds, which is what our state mandates, of course. Our state is tasked with creating a structure to fund our schools, and the way that Illinois works is that property taxes are the largest source of revenue for any school district in the state. What you also, of course, know is that any money that we're getting, federal, state, or local money, is all derived from property taxes, of course, or taxes of some kind. Any of the federal money we're getting is coming from taxes, same thing with the state. So all of the dollars that we're getting are coming from our community supporting our district. Similar to our revenues, this is exactly what we would expect to see in our expenditures. Our salaries and benefits are, of course, our largest expense. We are a people-heavy business, of course. We need staff, teachers, support personnel to educate our students. So seeing 74% in salaries and benefits is very consistent with what we would expect. Our next largest object is purchase services, which, of course, is attributed to our transportation costs.
Just for verification, that's also food, right? Food services?
Food services in there as well.
Okay.
Mhm. There's many things
There's
in
many
purchase
things.
services, yes, but when you see such a
Transportation's the big
one large, yes, absolutely, thank you for mentioning that. So as we're talking about what is our driving factors for our budget, I wanted to break down our spending for our staffing costs. So our teachers and professionals are, of course, the largest for our about $110 million in staffing, and this is not benefits, this is salaries alone. So about 70% of our staffing costs are attributed to our teachers and professionals. Then we have our classified, which includes our aides and support personnel in our education fund, as well as custodial, grounds, and maintenance, and that comprises about 15%. Then you have administrators at 8%, and all of our other. So that would be extra duty, longevity, overtime, double time, stipends, subs, all of the extra things that we need to support our district comes in at about 7%. So I know this is very small, but when we talk about allocating our resources, we want to get an idea of what are we spending our dollars on overall. So I know that Dr. Vine has shared this with you in the past, so I thought it was beneficial for us to take a look at for FY25. So you can see that the bottom 20% of our expenditures is just below line 6. So again, the majority of our budget is tied up in salaries, benefits, and then again, the next largest thing is transportation. So again, we are people heavy with salaries, benefits, everything below that. If we were to make large significant cuts, you can see that would be a significant portion of our budget that would need to be impacted in order to make an impact beyond programmatic. So I'll pause here and see if there's any questions on this, because I feel like we often talk a little bit about this chart.
Not seeing any questions.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll come back to that.
Mhm.
Okay. So what we have here is our tax rate for us as well as our neighboring districts. You'll see that the high school districts also reflect their feeder districts. So of course, we're a unit district and don't have a feeder district. So when you look at Stevenson, for example, you'll see that their tax rate is reflective of Killdeer 96. So each elementary school, just like each high school, just like each unit district, is going to have their own individual tax rate. So at Stevenson and Killdeer, for example, we're adding both of those numbers together to get the overall tax rate. We are, you can see, number 4. So we have gone up just a bit, as we knew we would with our referendum, and likely the other districts below us have maybe had some debt roll off in the last couple of years. So we are still significantly lower than our neighboring districts. So what does that mean for a taxpayer? If, for example, a taxpayer owned a home in Barrington worth $500,000 and then moved to a neighboring district, essentially anybody but Glenbrook, Wheaton, and Elmhurst, they're going to have a higher tax bill than if they were to stay in Barrington. So in this example I have on the next slide, I took the average of the districts that you saw on the previous slide. I didn't want to single out any single district and say, here's what the
Nicely
difference
done.
is. So here's the average, which is about 120% of what our tax rate is. So you can see a $500,000 home in Barrington with an assessment level that's even across both examples, a state equalizer, which is equal across both examples, as well as the homeowner exemption. In Barrington would be about $6,300. And keep in mind, this is just for the district's taxing base. This is not an individual's total tax bill, which of course would vary. Somebody in another district would be paying $7,600. So that's an increase of about $1,300 from our district to the average of our neighboring districts around us. So we talk about, districts that maybe can build a community auditorium out of their fund balance, for example. How are they doing that? It's with a higher tax rate. They're generating more revenue than a district with a lower tax rate. So I think it's pretty commendable to Barrington for all the great things that we're able to do, and we can do it at a value to our community. So wrapping up FY25, we talked a little bit about the budget, how it's comprised. How are we trending for this year? Well, we're tracking well. Interest earnings continue to remain high, so we're continuing to benefit from that. Of course, that's a bit of an unknown. We're rather conservative when we're making our assumptions, which we're going to take a look at in a minute, but we were conservative when we wrote our assumptions for FY25, and we continue to benefit from higher interest rates. ESSER funds are fully spent. I like to give myself a round of applause for that finally wrapping up, so we're very excited to say goodbye to ESSER. Thank you for all the great things that you gave us, and we put you to bed.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Would you say we don't have to account for it anymore?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I had a weird finance.
Thank you.
Sorry.
As Dr. Winkleman mentioned, we've had some water issues at some of our schools, some electricity issues. So we have had some unexpected facility spending, but we've been able to manage that within the budget. So as of right now, our spending is tracking well. If anything, again, we're seeing some higher interest earnings, but overall things are trending just as we expect. So we're going to talk a little bit about our assumptions, but one of the biggest items that drives the assumptions that lead into our budget is CPI. We talk about this throughout the year, every year. At the final hour of getting all of these documents out last week, CPI was released. So I had been using the assumption from November, which was 2.7, and then it was released at 2.9. So it was slightly higher than what I had been using for my assumptions, but I was able to update this and bake it into everything that we're going to continue to look at. So I've updated the assumption sheets, and I've been able to put that into the models that we're going to review. But CPI is so important because it drives all of our property tax increases, of course, and it also drives our salaries based on the contracts that we've engaged in. So CPI is a really important piece. Of course, we've been on this journey together as we have seen incredibly high CPI and watching that come down. And just a reminder, the Fed targets 2.5%, so you can see that we're getting closer to that as we get further away from the pandemic. So I will bring you to our forecast assumptions, which our finance committee has seen the last time that we were together, and we made some decisions around that. So if you open up the red folder that you have, on the right-hand side, you will see our FY26 assumption sheets. So I'm just going to talk through this sheet a little bit, and you can stop me with any questions or anything that you want to dive into a little bit deeper. So each year when we look at this, we always get a little bit confused, of course, about what year CPI is driving what, right? So you can see that the CPI year that's listed at the top is what is driving the revenue for the fiscal year that we're in. So for FY26, actually now I'm confusing myself here, we are going to be using the 2023 CPI, which was 3.4 for part of our fiscal year, and then we're going to be using the new CPI of 2.9 for the rest of the fiscal year, because our levy, of course, spans multiple fiscal years. So how can we complicate this any further, of course? But you can see the 2023 CPI was 3.4%. So that's sort of what we're using to start talking about the levy for the year, but we also know that it's going to be split over 2 fiscal years, which you can see in FY27 of the 2024 CPI, which is 2.9%. Is everybody with me there? All right. So you'll remember that we had an expiring TIF, and we also had a TIF that we needed to account for, that we also accounted for in the prior year. So you're going to see $20 million in new construction, which has been our assumption for the last couple of years, and I have set that out for the next 5. And then you'll see the TIF in our tax increment financing, the $8.5 million that we've also added. Your question?
Do you want questions as we go, or you want to wait till the end?
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, is 20 million reasonable over the last 5 years? Is that about what we're seeing?
Yeah, so we
Okay.
were doing about 18 million for a few years, and then each year we go through and check the average of the last 10 is usually what we're doing, and 20 million has served us well for the last 2 years. And of course, each year we'll be evaluating based on the prior year's levy.
So is there, can we just can we agree on each line item as we go through them, so we don't have to go back through them again?
Sure.
So is there any changes anybody wants to make to either the CPI, well, maybe let's take the CPI assumption
That's
first.
given.
Well, but the out years, right, for the model.
Oh,
So in the out years, as I mentioned, the Fed targets 2.5%. So 2024 is now known, and the out years I have at 2.5%.
Right, so is everybody comfortable with 2.5%?
Great. And the 20 million will continue to be evaluated after each year. If that doesn't suit us any longer based on our actual new construction, then we would change that moving forward.
Is everybody comfortable with that 20 million?
Sure.
So the next couple of lines are essentially accounting for the new construction and saying what the overall levy assumption would be. So it'd be the 3.4% plus the new construction in the TIF, which brings us to 4.3. And then our tax collection rate has been rather consistent at 99%, so I left that flat.
Just gonna pause and make sure everybody's okay. Not hearing nobody's raising their hand. Make sure we're
So
all
far, so good.
in sync here. We
Okay.
actually did change that tax rate one time.
We did.
And,
Yeah, we were concerned we weren't gonna be collecting.
yeah, we
Yeah.
thought we weren't gonna be getting it, and we did, so.
We did.
Yeah.
So another change to CPI, of course, this is what is now driving our salaries. So I have known information for CPI for 26, 27, and 28. And then in 29 and 30 for our teachers, I have used actual CPI to make that adjustments because we would need to go back into negotiations for those out years.
Okay. Everybody understand that?
How long our contract is.
Yeah, through fiscal year 2028.
Right.
And same application for our classified staff. And for our administrators, I use CPI in each year. And of course, that will come to the board for approval once we have finalized a recommendation for you for all of the administrators and the exempt staff. And medical insurance, I have flat at 3% in all years.
Is that pretty standard as far as what we've seen historically?
The 3%?
Yeah.
So 3% is contractual.
Oh, okay. Great.
It's not what the teachers pay, it's what we're paying.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Half
It's
the
what we're paying.
And that's contractual.
That's
Okay.
contractual.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's right, okay.
Yep. So I'm making the assumption that that wouldn't change in our negotiations. And I do have the TRS cost shift on here. This is an item that the legislature kind of has kicked the can on many, many, many times. But in order to be prepared for that, we have sort of a gradual adoption of it, if you will, in the forecast, because I think it's important in case it does creep up on us that we have considered it in our out years.
It's funny, Dave Bine had it in 4
Yep.
or 5 years ago, so as you say, kick the can down the road.
Yeah, as long as they keep doing it, we can do the same.
But you've got it in the model at.
I do.
At
Half
some
percent and
point,
1%.
at some point.
Yep, 28, 29, and 30. So I do have DSEB listed for your reference on what that would look like based on our CPI assumptions. And then investment rate of return is one that we generally talk a little bit about at the Finance Committee, which we did earlier this month. Interest rates are still tracking high right now, but as the approach we've taken in the past was to be on the conservative side because we know that could change at any time. So I have an assumption in here of 3.5%. This comes from talking with other districts. This comes from talking with PMA. On a long-term assumption, we are still in the mid-4s right now. We have a lot of investments that are locked in at even higher rates that will, of course, be maturing over the next several years, so we'll continue to benefit from that. And then I have a decrease to 2.75% in FY '27, 2.5, and then flat at 2% in '29 and '30. Any questions or
Any concerns there?
concerns there?
It's very conservative.
Yeah.
Okay, so CPPRT, we might remember a number of years ago, we had a large, I don't love the word windfall, but that's basically what happened unexpectedly. We then learned that the state made an error and they reduced our CPPRT pretty significantly a couple of years out. So we're still seeing some of that adjustment. This is the last year that I'm reflecting a decrease in CPPRT from the prior year, which is bringing us closer to our historic level over prior years. And then you'll see that I have that flat in the following years. So once we get back to historic levels, I think it's reasonable to assume that that will remain consistent. EBF changes approximately $7,000 every year, so I have that remaining flat at 100%. And then our state aid categorical growth, so this is our categorical payments on transportation is our largest one. So we have been happily receiving 4 payments over the last several years. 1 late payment from the prior year and 3 current payments. So might they catch up with that 1 extra payment 1 year? Maybe. Hopefully they just stick with 4 and then everyone knows what to expect. I have no change to federal aid or any other revenue growth that we're aware of.
Can you just explain the acronym CPPRT? I can never remember what it stands
Sure.
for, please.
Corporate personal property replacement taxes. So it generally comes to the state based on profits of corporations. So they pay a percentage of their profits to the state and then it's distributed to taxing bodies. So it changes with the economy, of course. So we thought that's why we were seeing such a huge increase over COVID when we got all of that new money. Part of it may have been that there was also an error at the state which inflated it. But as you see high economic growth, you might expect to see a bit more CPPRT, but it shouldn't be spikes.
In EBF, is that evidence-based funding?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And we receive, you said 7,000?
We get about 6.5 million is our
We get
base
6.5.
funding,
Okay.
and that increases about 7,000, which is why I
Oh,
left
I
it at
see.
100%.
So,
'Cause it's
so
such
we're
a-
basically figuring 6.5 million a
Yes,
year.
uh-huh.
It doesn't grow exponentially. It's
No,
very-
we're a tier 4 district, so we don't expect for it to grow. Tier 1 and 2 districts are who'd be receiving the additional funding. But we're happy if we continue to get our minimum.
The 6.5?
Yep.
Okay, and that is the minimum? And
That's our-
been
yes.
for tier 4?
Well, for us.
For us,
It's
okay.
based on prior years' worth of data, but the state has consistently been funding the 350 million that they are statutorily required to do. So as long as they continue to do that, we'll get our.
The 6.5?
Uh-huh.
Plus
And we don't have a
7,000.
crystal
Yep.
ball, but we are being told that the state is kind of tight right now. So do we anticipate that that's not going to decrease?
As of now, that's correct.
Okay.
Everybody comfortable there? Does anybody want to make any changes there to
Maybe
Jerry's point? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask a more general question. I mean, as far as the bottom line goes, can you point out, and maybe we've already gone through some of them, but can you point out what some of the more sensitive assumptions are? So for example, if, that evidence-based funding goes from, well, I guess 6.5 million is not going to move the needle, but assuming that it was a larger number, if it goes.
6.5 would make a significant
Yeah.
difference if we lost it. That would be a lot of money for us.
Well, fair enough. I guess I'm just thinking about the over 100 million, but.
Sure, I mean, property taxes is of course going to
Sure.
be the biggest impact, so CPI, if that were to have, my assumption was 2.7% based on November CPI. If that would have gone up 5 basis points or down 5 basis points, that would have changed the work that I was doing to get to tonight. So that would have been significant. With the majority of our dollars going towards salaries, again, CPI is really driving a lot
Sure.
of that. CPPRT, we're getting back to our about $1 million annually, so, would that make an impact? Absolutely. EBF, if that disappeared, that'd be a problem. State aid would be a problem if we missed a payment. We get about 7.5 to 8 million in transportation reimbursement annually, so if we were to miss a payment on that would be significant, and it would be very unexpected.
But at least up to this point, there's nothing that you're looking at that you're saying to yourself, there's a risk here. You're feeling pretty good about all these. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so everything coming into our revenue side, is there any assumptions that anybody wants to make a change to? Anything you just talked about?
If something changes nationally with the education department, does that affect any of that 3% at all, would you think?
The 3%.
From federal, that we get from federal? Sorry, it's not on here. I just meant the percentage that we
Oh.
receive from federal.
So the money that we're getting from the federal government is tied to grants, so.
Okay. And that's not tied to the education or Department of Education?
Well,
It
it
is,
is,
I
yes.
guess.
Now, IDEA is a huge grant that we received, the Individual Disability Education Act. That would take dismantling a lot of those laws as well as the Department of Education. So I think that there'd be some additional steps, but that would be significant.
You don't think we need to factor that in right now? Potentially. I guess it's so unknown, right?
Yes.
I understand
It's up to
why,
us.
why you're asking. There's just not any new information as of
There's
the
nothing
meeting
solid.
tonight. But, I think it's something to consider and we're gonna watch, but we
Right.
wanna make a change tonight and make decisions.
Now's the time to do it, right? Or maybe at least understand that sensitivity, Steve, that you were talking
Yeah.
about.
Right.
Right, what's the sensitivity if it goes down, what do we wanna know? I mean, if there's some sensitivity we wanna know, then we should ask for
We
it.
can, we're gonna review some models,
Mhm.
so you'll be able to see what an impact like that might look like.
Is there a way in, let's say something happens in a month and a half, that we can amend the budget?
Certainly. So remember, we're not even adopting the 26 budget until September.
Right.
So we would be,
Chances to-
yes, we would be
Okay.
having some additional conversations before we even got to the point that you're seeing a tentative budget if something significant were to happen.
Okay.
However-
There was one year that Dave Vine did give us an amended budget. I forgot
It
if
was
there was more
2021
because of COVID.
because of COVID, and we issued another referendum bond that year. Mhm. Yeah, my first year, yes, we did 2 budgets.
I was just gonna say, but a big portion of our budget, as we just talked about, is salaries, right? So that's why we're having this conversation now, because we have to make sure we understand our staffing for the coming year.
Mhm.
So it's more difficult to make those kind of changes after, back in September, after the summer.
Definitely.
So keep that in mind as well.
We are keeping our ear to the ground on
Oh my gosh,
all
yeah.
things Department of Education, and we have looked into the grants and the federal impact, so we do know what those dollar amounts would look like.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask again, any changes to the revenue section of Ed Fund that anybody wants to make? Trying to catch everybody's, see the whites of their eyes? I guess not. Okay?
Okay, so expenditures are very consistent from Ed Fund, Operations and Maintenance, and Transportation. They are following the CPI assumption for 2024, except for purchase services and transportation is 5%, which is the increase for our BTC contract. And then all of the out years I have tied to CPI. I remember a couple of years ago, we did talk about increasing the assumption for transportation.
Mhm.
So I wanted to bring that to the group and see if that's something you wanted to see as well. When we did that a couple of years ago, we were seeing some pretty significant increases in the market for transportation, and our contract was up. 26 is our last year, so we'll be talking about a contract renewal in 26 for 27 with BTC. And right now, there's nothing indicating the significant increases that we were seeing a couple of years ago coming off of COVID and increases to staffing costs. So as we did with our most recent renewal, we will do our best to align that with CPI.
Are there still issues with hiring enough bus drivers, or is that leveled out? Because that was a concern, right? That was part of the cost of transportation.
It's still an issue, but we have enough drivers to do our routes every day.
Because I know even some September or August, it was like, ooh, we're not in a good place. So that's good news.
And again, we have a contract, so.
Yeah, but if they can't find any drivers, we still
Well,
have an
that's-
issue, right? That's,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
It's their issue, but yes.
Well, then
It affects us.
that becomes
It
our
affects us.
issue.
Yeah.
It's kind of,
No,
Okay.
that's true. but we're one of the lucky districts, we don't run the transportation like some of the other districts.
Right, right.
I think it's more, they're more sensitive than we need to be, but yes, we don't want to put our heads in the sand either, and know that it's an issue.
So any questions around assumptions for expenditures?
Any changes anybody wants to make?
Just a clarification, actually. So I understand that you're aligning the ed fund expenditures to CPI. Is there anything driving that spend? And that would suggest we're gonna just see increases? There's no opportunity to look at what we're spending on and perhaps, you know, from a cash flow standpoint, just deferring certain expenses?
We look at that every year, of course, if there's something that doesn't need to be done. Is there something else that needs to be done? Are there staffing needs that we have? The creation of this was to get to the base model so that you could sort of see where we are with my baseline assumptions, and then we could make adjustments from there. But are we doing a zero-based budgeting at this point? No, this is what's getting us to the budgeting process, which will then lead to a lot more of those conversations, if that
Yeah, no, I'm
answers
just
your
trying to
question.
remember, because at one point, and I think it was maybe 2 years in a row, you know, your team had committed to doing basically 0% increases. But you're saying that was during the budget process, after you've had several months to, you know, kind of determine what the, you know, needed elements are, rather than, I just don't recall if we did it here, the committee of the whole, or if we did it
We did
at
it
the September
here.
budget meeting. Oh, so we did do it here.
We did it here. Either we came to you with a 0% because that was the only way for us to get a surplus that'll keep us within our fund balance, or we made the decision here at the table to change the assumption.
Sure. Yeah, I don't recall what the driver was. But okay, so then we did come at this meeting.
This is the
arrive
meeting,
at-
yes. So
okay.
then Jen essentially starts budgeting as the next, of course, I have a slide on what's next. And
Sure.
one of those things is the 25-26 budget. So this is really sort of day one of the board making some decisions to then drive the next steps for the budget creation.
Okay. So this gets this surplus, all right. Is that, okay, well, I guess I'll get to the next pages. All right. No change for now then.
Okay, great. Okay, so we can move into our forecast models. So I have 2 models prepared for you. The first model is a base model based on all of these assumptions that we just reviewed. And you'll see at the top, it's a little bit, it's justified in the middle of the page is our base model, and it says base model at the top.
Okay.
And this reflects what our fund balance would look like with this base model. And of course, the top and bottom line are reflecting the 25 to 40%, which is our fund balance policy. So taking a look at the first page that you have in your packets, they're stapled together. The second page is the model that you're seeing on the screen. You can see at the bottom of the page, it's showing the fund balance as a percent of the expenditures. That's not how we calculate our fund balance, but it's rather close to the way that we do that. So I left it in here so that you could see rather close to where we might be landing for 26 and beyond. So we are still within our fund balance policy of 25 to 40% in the 5-year forecast. 29% is a comfortable place that the board has been over the last couple of years. With some surpluses, we have increased into the 30 range. You can see that the assumption on this page, if all things remain equal, would be that we're ending the FY25 year in the low 30% range. Again, these numbers on here are not exactly what it would be. This calculation is a bit different, but I left it on here just so that you could get a sense. So you can see on the surplus deficit, including other financial sources, our projection for FY '26 based on these assumptions of where we would end, or where we would prepare the budget to.
So I'm trying to remember, your recommendation is that we sit right around 29 to 30 for, at the end of the 5-year forecast. Because that's
Yes.
ultimately where we want to be
Mhm.
long-term.
The middle of that, around 30%, is what the board has been comfortable with over the last few years. 30%, 29 to 30% is where we have been for the last 4 years, I believe. So that's a place that we are comfortable being.
And you're assuming that the full surplus goes right into the fund balance?
Correct.
Because in the past, I think we've divvied up a little bit, some to capital, some to, okay.
Yes, yes, it's always gonna be important that we're still maintaining the fund balance.
Oh, no, I understand.
So, yes, if the surplus was higher, then maybe we would still have that opportunity. I don't wanna talk too much, so please let me know if you have questions. And let me know if you're ready, I can move on to the second model I see some have taken a look at.
Can you just comment on your base model, why 5 years out, we end up with a deficit?
Sure, that's pretty consistent to what we see in a 5-year model. It's what FY '29 looked like in last year's 5-year forecast is not what FY '29 looks like in this 5-year forecast, same with FY '28. Every year, things are evolving. Our CPI assumptions are changing. What CPI actually is gonna change. There's a lot of things that might fluctuate. Any resource reallocations that we might be doing is going to obviously affect the 5-year forecast. In FY '30, let me back up. We have some benefit of retirement savings in the next couple of years. FY '30, we are just starting to get some of the notifications of retirees. Those aren't due until February 1st, I think. So that will impact FY '30. I, of course, have an assumption in there, but that could change as well. So we generally are seeing a deficit in years 4 and 5, sometimes even 3, 4, and 5. And we know that that's something that we're keeping an eye on.
But not to be
It's
alarmed.
helpful, but not to be alarmed. It's helpful for us in planning and knowing what's coming. Same thing with our capital projects. Anything looking 5 years out is helpful, but what FY '30 looks like now is probably not what FY '30 is gonna look like when we're sitting here together next year.
But it does give the board some indication of, we're making some decisions today, and if you want to look ahead, those decisions, are we flush at the end,
Mhm.
or are we trying to run it close to even or even a slight deficit? So,
And that gets reflected in the curve, that's why we see this curve
Absolutely.
downturns.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions on the base model?
If you want to use an education term, you can say eyes on me.
Eyes on me.
Instead of whites of their eyes.
My.
Like, don't tell her that.
Okay.
You know, Sandra, another one I've heard is, everyone can hear me, clap twice.
Yeah, you can.
Right.
That's up to you if you want to go there. I was just trying to make sure Sandra was getting eye contact.
Just want to make
from
sure
the
we're
board.
good
Getting
to
response.
move on to the next.
So a question, and, surpluses are better than deficits, but it's, millions of dollars. And I know it's the percentage of the budget, and that's a small percentage of the budget, but as the, sensitivity question came up here with Steve, I don't know. I look at that and think, it's better to break even closer, but we also don't want to guess wrong and then have a deficit.
Well, breaking even.
Not predict wrong, not guess,
Sure.
predict.
Well,
Forecast.
the reality of any sort of assumptions and projections is you are making educated guesses, of course, to make that decision. Breaking even would reduce our fund balance, and doing that multiple years in a row would be problematic to our fund balance, and then we'd be having different conversations. So we do need to maintain a surplus in order to even maintain our fund balance because it's a percentage of our revenues. So as our revenues are increasing every year, your surplus needs to increase every year in order to maintain your fund balance. So if we were to have a $0 surplus, $1 surplus, at the end of that year, we'll have a reduction in our fund balance.
Okay, that makes sense.
Well, I think your question, though, I think is a good one for the community as well, since we're talking about it. I mean, I think another way of explaining this is if we look at the assumption sheet, the assumptions for fiscal 26 carry out for 5 more years. And there's really there's minor adjustments on certain elements, but for the most part, they're pretty consistent.
Mhm.
And so I think the takeaway is that without intervention, all things being equal, at the rate that our revenues increase, it's lower than the rate at which our expenses are increasing. So without, us and the administration intervening and making adjustments, this is where we're going. But of course, 5 years out, it's very hard for us to say, we're gonna pull this lever, or we're gonna pull that lever. So it just stands to reason, I think, that by year 5, or in this case, fiscal 30, we'll see this decline, but hopefully within the next 2 years, when we have fiscal 30 being only 3 years out, we'll have them be at the same level that we have right now, what we have at fiscal 28. I think that's the way I'm viewing it.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And then you are hopefully still seeing a consistent fund balance, even with those adjustments being made.
Because I think your goal overall, like while our target is 29-30, I mean, it's pretty evident that even the base model here is showing 33. So you want to have cushion to keep us, because that fund balance amount, while the percentage is pretty stable, the amount has to grow too, right? Because it's a function of
It
the
does.
revenue.
And this percentage is a function of the expenditures, whereas ours is revenue. So it does operate just a little bit differently, which makes it actually a little bit lower than the numbers that you're seeing here, but still within our range,
Yeah,
and still in a
direction.
comfortable place. But I think Dr. Bryan used to say, I'm your business manager, I'm always gonna be conservative for you. So of course, I'm certainly not going to recommend something that I believe is going to put us in a position that we are not gonna be able to pay for the commitments that we've made and to continue operating the district in the way we want to.
So this base model assumes the 2.5 to 3 million for capital projects every year.
This base model assumes that we are issuing DSEB for FY '26. This does not do any reduction in the district's operating funds to put money into capital. So, no.
Oh,
So
you know,
this
make
is
sure that we all
2.5
understand that.
So no, that's a
Yes.
great point, Sarah. I guess I
this
didn't
is-
think about
This is the
that.
2.5 to 3, this is if it was flat. Yes.
Right.
So then the reality is our surplus, just using the base model as an example, in fiscal '26, we have to find, I guess, between 1.2 to 2. We need to deduct that from that surplus. Is that right? In order to fund at the level that we've discussed?
If you were to do no reallocation of resources and you were just to transfer money straight from the education fund, that would reduce the surplus,
Yeah.
correct?
Okay. So then
And it would reduce the
year-end balance.
the percent.
and the
Yes.
percent,
Fund
right?
balance percent.
Mhm.
So then what is that? We took.
So this does include those 3 million that we
Correct.
previously
Yes.
assumed would be
Yep.
going
That's
towards
under operation.
summer projects.
Yes, so this assumes a $2.7 million DSEB issuance.
And spending that 2.7 or 3, whatever.
Mhm.
So I guess if we want to get to 5, we're going to be looking for 2 million somehow.
Over a couple of years. So in
Yeah.
'26, yes, the recommendation is not 5, but yes.
4.2.
So what is the recommendation? So
4.2.
4.2.
Okay, 4.2. Yeah, 4.2, okay. Is everybody comfortable with that? Guessing that's where we're going with this next model?
The next model actually is a I did not model that, not knowing
Okay,
where we might be reallocating resources.
okay.
The next model is a conservative assumption using a 0% increase on supplies, purchase services, and capital in the education fund.
Yeah, right, so that's
Mhm.
just what I was asking.
Yep.
It's not that big of a change.
So that gets us about
$400,000.
$400,000.
Yeah, like 300,000.
And this is still the $2.5 to $3 million.
Correct, this
allocation.
is, yep. Mhm.
So I'm just ballparking it, but I'm sorry, just going back to the base for a quick second. If we're just doing the straight line, 62, 546, 690, the projected year end for fiscal '26 and dividing it by the 191, that gets us 32.7.
It is not all funds that are used to do the calculation.
Sure.
So it'll be a little lower than the 33%. I apologize, I don't have the math.
That's okay.
in front of me, but
I did a
yeah,
back of the envelope.
it's certain funds for the revenue and then certain funds for the fund balance.
Yeah, nope,
So-
totally get it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just doing back of the envelope just so we have some point of reference, but if we were to take away $2 million from that, it still gets us to 31.7, so it's really just 1% or so. So it's actually not that big of a lift. I mean, I guess that your question is how comfortable do y'all feel losing that 1%? I mean, you got there doing basically nothing.
It will be a reduction in the fund balance from year
Right.
over year, so you're.
Well, but I'm saying no additional intervention at this stage, right?
So if you went with the conservative assumption
Mhm.
and then made a projection of a $240,000 surplus, is that what you're recommending?
240,000, well, I'm sorry. say that
Or you're
again?
taking 1 million away, so it would be a 1.2 million?
I took away 2 million, actually. So it comes down to 546.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the surplus, not
Oh.
the fund balance.
If you take
Oh, I'm
$2 million
sorry.
away, then you have a
So-
$200,000 surplus
Right.
in fiscal year '26.
So.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry.
in-
Where are you seeing 200,000?
So on the conservative assumption, if you're looking at surplus deficit including
Oh, you're
other
looking at conservative, I'm
financing
sorry.
sources,
I'm
you
sorry.
have a $2.2 million surplus.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So just for clarification, I am recommending a $1.3 million investment, I'm sorry, I don't have my note in front of me, into, let me pull it up. I'm recommending a $1 million additional investment for FY '26. So if you were to reduce that by $2 million right out of the gate, you would either be banking that for a future or you'd be adding on to that investment.
Mhm.
If, I guess I just want to understand, if DSEB for fiscal year '26 is 2.7 million, and we want to get to 4.2, why are we not looking for 1.5?
It's 2.7 million plus the $500,000 in operations and maintenance that we invest each year. So DSEB
okay.
was about 2.5 for many, many years. So we had 2.5 in DSEB and 500,000 in operations and maintenance. So what we have not been doing over the years is as that's been escalating, we have not been investing more to sort of offset those dollars.
Okay.
So I was taking both of those numbers each year and escalating them by CPI, which really should be part of our calculation. So we can generally do more than the 3 million right out of the gate because we're factoring in the true value of DSEB plus the 500,000 from operations and maintenance.
Sarah's filling in a little bit of the gap that has
Okay.
existed and being
Okay.
more specific with it
Yes,
in her
thank you.
calculations
Okay.
than maybe what we've done more generally in the past.
We've been very consistent with the 2.5 to 3 million number for many, many years.
Right.
This sort of helps us, escalate that.
So we've gone from 2.5 to 0 on purchase services.
Yes, I have
On
made.
these two assumptions.
Mhm, I have made some assumptions for things to escalate that we don't have control over, such as food service or maybe our outplacement costs. So this is not saying that all things in the ed fund will remain at 0% because that is not possible for us, but our essentially department and building budgets would remain at the 0% for purchase services, supplies, and capital.
And I know we've done 0% multiple years in the past. I'm just wondering if our district can sustain that year after year when there is inflation. Paper, for example. You know, I don't want the teachers to say, I can't give you a written test because we ran out of paper. Our paper budget is not. Or so I just think we want to be careful that we don't cut too much in that category and maybe look at some other categories to help, you know, allow us to keep it comfortable. You tell me, can we sustain another couple of years of 0% on purchase services, not including, like you said, food service, and comfortably do that without jeopardizing our educational product that we're offering to our kids?
It's certainly challenging, and we've talked a lot about CPI and how that increases year over year, and our value of $1 is not what it was a number of years ago. We are making decisions that allow us to do that, and we would continue to do. Did you want to?
No, keep going.
We would continue to make decisions based on what is available to us to spend. It is certainly challenging, as we've talked about. The value of $1 only continues to increase.
Wait, sorry, so where's the 0% in purchase? I'm seeing
So
2.2 to 1.5. Am I looking at the wrong thing?
The two different models.
Coming out of
Right.
surplus.
You have to look at the purchase service line there.
Right, the purchase service
It goes from
line.
29,628 to 29,405, for example. And then the next line down goes from
Yeah.
8695 to 8561.
I see.
Right, so it's the deduction, does it, we're not, it doesn't go to 0 though, right? We're just-
Well,
It's the growth.
It's the growth.
Oh, the growth.
Yes.
Oh,
Mhm.
oh, I see, okay.
And as I mentioned, I did account for a number of things that we need to account for increases on, so that we aren't reducing someone else's budget.
We're not wiping it out, Aaron, we're just
Yeah.
not letting it grow.
Yes.
Got it, okay.
Right.
It's like, wait, I'm not
And you can
understanding
see the
something.
differences in the percentages too,
Yeah, right.
in the two models.
Right, okay.
So again,
So the growth is 0. We're not adding to it, basically.
Sorry,
Correct.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry. No, I-
Explain it.
no, it's a
Yeah, I
lot.
just wanted to make
Ask-
sure that I'm
ask questions,
understanding.
clarify.
Mm-hmm.
But any decisions we made, right, there's an impact, and I just want to clarify that, you know, when we make one decision, there is an impact. I think what you meant was it's going to be a manageable impact. Barry, you're asking a question, can we sustain that impact? We're all trying to, you know, work through ways to look at our model to meet all these different needs that we've identified and our community has also identified for us to be mindful of.
So would the 0% growth get us the 1 million that we're looking for?
No.
No.
It's
No.
like 400,000.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So the philosophy that 220 has as it relates to budgeting is more of a top-down approach, right? So we, in this room, effectively create the budget, and then we kind of push it down to the individual schools, and they basically need to correspond with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess I would phrase it just a little bit differently. The board establishes policies that then inform our budgeting process. So, like, we've been talking about that expectation, that's like fund balance expectation, that's derived from decisions the past board has made, and this current board has reinforced that same expectation, and that is in policy that we need to be at those levels. The board always reserves the right, Steve, to revisit those policies or maybe change those practices, and then we would take that new information and build it into the models. Tonight is us using those available decisions that boards have made, but that's how we're building the budget collaboratively between, I would say it's more collaborative.
Sure,
with the
of course.
administration and board working together to find the right combination that meets the goals
Yeah.
that we've identified.
Well, Barry just said something that sparked something in me. You know, I'll just take it offline with you.
Okay.
Right, so this base model gets us to roughly 400,000 of the.
The conservative.
The
model.
conservative.
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't say it
So
wrong.
we would need
You
to
said
find,
base, you meant
Sorry,
conservative.
I meant conservative.
we need another
The second one we looked
600K,
at.
right, to get to the
I'm
million?
sorry?
We would need to look for another 600K to get to the 1 million, is that, okay.
Maybe I'm not understanding. I thought it was a bigger number from when we started without these.
It's only 1.2 incremental is what we're trying to find. Because we already have the established 3, or 2.5 to 3.
It's the DSEP.
Oh, well, then it's that too, yeah.
Okay.
Well-
Because we're starting with 3.2, right, with the 2.7 million in D-sub plus the 500,000?
Yes.
And so then to get to 4.2, we only need the million. So then we'd have the 400K with 0% growth,
Mhm.
and so we'd be looking for 600K.
Correct. Yep. Unless, of course, we want to hit 5 million, in which case, then we're looking for.
Then you're looking for.
Right.
Yeah, then we're looking
For more.
Leo, the number is bigger as it's compounding.
Okay, all right.
But 4.2 is
So
our
over
starting
5
point.
years,
But
right,
You
yeah.
want to
Gotcha.
find a lot more money,
Mhm.
Leah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Because I was thinking the 1.5 to 2 is what we needed to find. Okay,
I was too until tonight.
all right, sorry.
And yes, each year, right?
Okay.
Each year is growing and each year you're needing those numbers, so compounding.
Well, I think you should also take into account that $5 million today is going to be worth less in 5 years. So in other words, if we do,
Right.
3 equal-sized projects this year, those same 3 projects in 5 years is going to be,
More.
incrementally more.
And that's why we need to keep.
So finding a little
keep
bit more
looking.
now would actually help.
Would actually help.
That's kind of what I'm saying,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good point. No, that's a very, very good point.
If we could.
Yeah, because the more we do now, the less we have to do tomorrow.
But 4.2 is the FY26 starting point.
I think that's if I
Minimum.
recall from the memo,
Minimum
like, that's the,
starting point.
recommended starting point.
Right.
And with the conservative model, we need 600,000.
Thank you. And so are we asking the administration to go and make some recommendations on that 600,000?
Yeah, can we,
Yes.
I would say, can we find between 600 and 1.4? Since that's the other 800 to get to, that's the 5 mil?
That's assuming that we're going 0%. I still, when we talked about maybe going, instead of 2.5, going to 1% or something, still giving them a little bit of leeway on their purchase services, so.
So,
I'm
Yeah,
just
but I'm
throwing that
hearing
out.
them say,
I hear ya.
I hear you, but I'm hearing them say, and I was looking at their whites of their eyes. As we were talking,
As they
to
were
see if
clapping.
anybody, to see if anyone was struggling. They're telling us, Barry, that with this conservative, no one has a concern.
Is this true? No, I guess I was looking.
That's what I heard.
You have no concern.
I was looking
then?
over there, so.
No, I was looking at Sarah, so I guess I didn't look at the whites of their eyes.
Oh my God, this is so weird. Sorry, this is weird.
No, I just want to hear that,
No, that's a fair
I just don't
question.
want to tie your hands. I want to make sure you have some freedom to be creative and not say no to people when you really want to say yes. I mean, obviously, you're going to have to say no to keep a budget, but, where in your heart, you're like, yeah, I really want to give it to you, but I can't because the board's tied my hands. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I guess I do want to hear that you feel like it's okay to keep it at 0.
Barry, we made the recommendation to the board with the conservative model. I almost did it too.
Sorry. The base conservative.
With the understanding that, yes, we can do that in our budgeting today, right? As I said earlier, it's manageable, but there are some downsides to it. But it's manageable to answer your question. So can we do it? I mean, these are hard conversations. They're hard for our
Absolutely.
staff to answer too. But we understand that there are competing needs of where are we building the budget to flow our dollars. Our responsibility and charge from the board back in August was figure out a way for us to have all the information available to budget plan. So this is the board's opportunity
Right.
to inform us with that direction. We're not trying to be coy or evasive. I think I said, there's impact, and some of those impacts are negative, but it's manageable. I think I speak for our team. We've spent 6 months preparing this, trying to give information for the board. So we wouldn't bring a conservative model that we didn't
live.
believe we could live with. There's no perfect. I wish there was perfect where I'm like, that I could really believe what maybe Steve's comment earlier of like, oh, we can go that direction. There's always going to be some trade-offs. There's no way to avoid that in these conversations.
Well, and if we can cut costs with that viewpoint on that topic and not, be talking about programs and staff, that's where the board has directed you, I believe, in the past, that let's save money on pencils and still, keep a lot of staff and a
Yeah.
lot of programs.
And
keep the buildings good. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an impossible ask, but
it is impossible, but we're trying to figure out how to shift costs, really. We're still working with those dollars. We're shifting them to meet different needs that have been identified. And I think the need we're trying to discuss and figure out is this need of we're not funding our ongoing facility needs at the rate that we need to, right?
Right.
So there are going to be adjustments. There's going to be, but it's manageable, I guess is the only way to say it, because it's not favorable. We don't, as the administration, but it's manageable.
Well, the reality is, this is a yearly budget, so
Mhm.
it's in a year, we are sitting here and they're like, it's not working, we need Meyer back
Yeah,
and we need more growth and
we will
then we would
definitely
have to adjust something else. and-
bring that
and
to the board
give
for
it
consideration.
back.
Well, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there are, mid-year adjustments that still need to be made because if, there's a burning demand for something, I'm sure we'll have to authorize it from your guys' standpoint, and then we'll just have to find an opportunity elsewhere.
we
So-
don't want that to happen, Steve.
Oh, of course, but, I mean, if one of the operating units goes over budget, so be it, right? I mean, as long as.
Well, and it's like, I see where Barry's concerned, locking in for 5 years, I get what you're saying,
Because
but I
we've
guess
already
in my
done the last
mind,
couple of years too, so
Yeah.
it's.
I guess in my
Can you
mind,
address that?
it doesn't have to be.
So
But
keep
it's not
in
for 5
mind,
years, right? It's only for one.
it's only for
Yeah.
1 year,
Right.
and the savings is the compounding from
Right.
this year's decision. So the assumptions assume an increase in all of these areas to align with CPI each year in the remaining years.
Okay, right.
So this is a
You're
one-time.
not deciding tonight it's zero increase for
Mhm.
5 years. You're
Right.
deciding
Yeah,
tonight
okay.
it's zero increase for
This year.
next year.
But I think of my 6 years on the board, I think we've already done this.
I know.
I mean,
I know why
we've
you're
picked on this topic, and maybe there are others we could look at, and again, I defer to our administration. If you guys say we can do it, I'm not gonna fight the battle.
Yeah, and it's not
I just feel like this is what
exactly-
we pick each time, and at some point, it's like, we need these supplies, we need these purchase services. We can't keep, holding the line on that, when there may be other areas where we might be able to hold the line for a year or two. So I'm just trying to play devil's advocate.
Well, Barry, if it makes you feel better, if I'm looking at the presentation right, I mean, we're talking about we'll call it $400,000 on, so it's $100,000 of the total expense. But when we look at purchase services and supplies and other, that's, in excess of, looks like about $40 million in total cost. So really impacting, I'm sorry, not $100,000, $1 million worth of that $40 million. Everything else is still growing or increasing with contracted rates or other assumptions, right?
Yeah, and it's more like 50 million.
Is it more like 50?
For all
Okay.
of those. Mhm.
Oh, I'm sorry, because you have to include
Right.
all other objects too, right?
Right,
8
and
million?
of
Okay.
course, a piece of that is transportation, which I have increased.
Sure, of
But,
course.
the.
So,
the other
so yeah, I
areas.
mean, it's like $1 million of that 50, thank you.
And to Dr. Winkleman's point, we have been talking about this for a long time, and we had agreed as a team that we wouldn't bring anything forward that we couldn't manage, so.
I defer to the administration.
We may not have this
And again,
recommendation
it's-
next year, but right now,
Right.
this is something that we're comfortable
I just
with.
want to emphasize too, it's not exactly zero. I know it's hard for everybody that's following along, but it's not exactly zero. It's zero where you can take the zero. Right?
It's a zero where Sarah is accounting for, there is still growth.
Right.
In that category,
Yes.
but we're trying to use that as a general
Yep.
guideline.
So, Steve, you threw out asking the administration to come back with 600 to 1.4 million. Is everybody good with that kind of a range, and then there's a couple things that we talked about last year I just want to review again, make sure I see we've got our class size in here. Want to talk about that a little bit.
There are other
Well, you know what?
categories.
If now I'm getting greedy, I guess. But if we're gonna do this anyways, I mean, why don't we have a stretch goal too? And I don't know what that stretch goal is, but if our range is 600 to 1.4, I don't know. I'm just throwing out a number. Can we propose a stretch goal being 2 million?
Is everybody willing to do?
I mean, I'm indifferent to what it could be 1.5. I'm just throwing out a number.
What number gets us there again?
600 technically.
600,000. So 600 to 1.4 would put us at 4.2 to 5.6, right?
No, 500. I'm sorry, 5 million. 4.2 to 5 million. Because it's the additional 800,000.
Oh, okay.
If that's all you got, if we don't want to do a stretch, that's fine too. I'm just throwing out an idea.
I'll just mention as we continue to look at the budget and what makes up the budget, you know, this is one opportunity that is a non-programmatic impact.
Yes.
As we continue to evaluate our options, that may not remain that way.
Sure.
Right. I'm most comfortable with the 600 to 1.4, but
Okay.
I liked your range. Does anybody want to go deeper? Want to have us go deeper? I'm sure if you find something, we'll hear it.
Starting point, for sure.
I think 1.4 is a good goal. We can get there comfortably.
Can we, and you said we could maybe do that through non-programmatic.
No, I'm saying that.
Okay, you explain.
No.
This is a non-programmatic.
Okay, it already is,
But
you're
yes, the
saying.
deeper, of course, we're getting into
Yeah.
cuts based on our budget and what makes our budget, we're getting into programmatic. The
Right, you're just saying
monitoring
the 0% growth on purchase services is obviously non-programmatic, right?
Yes.
Okay, but not necessarily the 600 to 1.4.
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm taking notes, trying to follow the conversation.
Mhm.
So what I'm hearing is we've identified the conservative model of a 0% calculated, zero growth in that category. 400,000. Earlier tonight, as we were starting the conversation, we had a discussion around what's the target number we're looking for. We're looking for another 600,000 to get us to 1 million. However, the board is giving direction of, can you actually look at a range between 600,000 and 1.4? We're not going to 2, just so that I've got clear direction of the work that our team is going to put together. Is that accurate?
All eyes on Craig.
Which would get us to a 4.2 to 5 million range. I don't know why I did that math all wrong, but yes, tops out at 5.
I'm good with that. I was just proposing an idea since we're all here talking about it. If we wanted to try and get a little more cushion for fiscal 27.
Because we'll work hard to meet whatever
Yeah.
guidance we get tonight from the board. This is about the board's ability to make some preliminary budget decisions to then help guide, and we'll work hard to do the work to meet that expectation.
I like 1.4 being the top end, but I'm not opposed, Steve, because we're just looking, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not opposed to seeing it higher to see what it would look like. Then we have a broader range. But if it makes other people really uncomfortable to go above 1.4.
Well, the reason I say stretch is because, with what comes back, respectfully, you might have, $500,000 of expenses in there that we're like, no way we can do this, right?
You're
So
saying
then
give us more options, give us $2 million
Essentially,
worth
yeah.
of options. And
Correct, and we can
up
hopefully
with
come up with 1.4 that's reasonable and not gonna, materially impact what we're doing here. That's why I say that, but otherwise, like I said, I'm not, pushing that hard today.
Would a different way to ask be to say, does the board want to consider programmatic options, or do we want to not?
I think we're already going to have to
We're gonna
consider programmatic options.
I guess, and to Steve's point, I don't want to not consider a $1.4 million change because you guys come back with only 1.4 million and we all agree we don't like one of the things on there.
Yeah.
Whereas if we have maybe 2 million worth of choices, we could eventually get to 1 million or 1.4 million. Do you see what I'm saying? Or even 1.8, I don't care, 1.6.
Well, and we have that low range too, so that when we see it, if we say, oh, wait, we want to stop at 600,000, that's an option
Yep.
too. I'm okay with 600 to 2. But if we could see that range, like the 600, the 1.4, and the 2, that would be helpful.
Next board meeting's in 2 weeks, is that enough time, or are you gonna need more time to get to 2 million?
Well, to be clear, to get to 2 million, or to get to 1.4, or to get to 600,000, we need more direction from the board tonight. We need to understand
Okay.
where the other categories you want us to consider and so forth. Because our team has worked hard to try to get us to this point and provide information. But I need more direction from the board tonight to understand where are we spending our time. In other words, we've spent the last half an hour, 45 minutes talking about non-programmatic adjustments. There are other categories that, one of which was already mentioned. Do we want to look at programs, right? Do we want to look at class sizes? And, you know, those other categories, I need some direction from the board tonight.
Okay, so how about we talk about class sizes? Let's put a pin in our 1.4 to 2 for a second.
Okay?
And talk about class sizes, because last year we talked about making, staffing to our guidelines, but allowing, I can't remember how we phrased it last year, but allowing a bit more red, right?
Red being.
Red being more over.
Sections that are above the guidelines that we use as far as the range of number of students in sections across the district, yes.
But within our contractual obligations.
100%.
Right, so-
We're gonna meet our contract obligations, and we're going to look at those guidelines of class size ranges, yep.
Right. So last year we said, no, we're gonna let's continue to staff to guidelines. So is the board, have that same, thoughts? Are the two that are here, is there a difference between the two?
Yeah, Tina, would you, Dr. Rivera, would you mind sharing the resources in the folder?
So you'll see on the top,
I need my glasses for this.
there's at the top, that gray bar.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about sections, looking at sections, and the other one is just the projected traditional.
I'm sorry, so one
So
is.
the traditional projected does not have just as usual.
Staffing to guidelines.
That's, yeah, traditional, when you see that, it's a gray box at the top.
The title
says
says
traditional,
traditional,
projected. I'm
and one
sorry.
says projected.
Okay.
I had to put my glasses on to read it, so.
Okay, so look, so the traditional,
Is as it has been, so
staffing to guidelines.
that's right. And then the other one is, possibly would be above guidelines, but below what the contract.
Yeah, we would stay within the contract, right? We're gonna honor the contract, but we would staff differently
Correct.
using our guidelines.
Okay. Let everybody absorb that for a moment. You see, I'm looking at a few more red, but not, it's not catastrophic.
Correct. There would still, even by staffing differently for next year, there are still a number of sections in the blue. It's just the way that we note sections that exist that are under our guidelines. Several still in guidelines, but it would increase a small number of sections that would go over the established guidelines.
The green is your just over.
I'm sorry, Kate, didn't hear your
Sorry.
question. Green is what?
Green highlight is what? Just over +1, right?
Additional section.
Oh, an
Addition, yeah.
additional, okay.
The number of sections is increasing year
All
over
right,
year.
gotcha.
Yellow, the initial, the sections are decreasing year over
Yeah,
year.
thank you.
You know, just for the benefit of those listening, can you, Dr. Winkleman, mention, you know, what would trigger, or what would make it so that we would bring in an aid or something along those lines?
Yeah, we have a mechanism in place, again, through the contract. Do you want to?
Yeah, it would be 29 students.
Okay.
Which I don't see any of.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't see any high here either, actually.
Again, keeping within the contract.
Right. But, of
29
course,
triggers another section, right? Is that?
no,
No.
it triggers
No.
possibly an aid.
An aid.
Oh, an aid, okay.
Yeah. But of course, administration has the discretion to say, well, we have a need based on fill in the blank.
Yep.
And so even though it's 28, we can add an aid.
We always have that discretion, and keep in mind, we're looking at projections for next year on January 21st. Every year, we're monitoring this between now and August 20th, and we may make adjustments along the way this spring, as well as during the summer months. You know, this current year, we added sections even into the summer because we were seeing some enrollment growth, and they got too big for at certain schools and at certain grades. So I just need general guidance of, we try to give you an example.
Sure.
Knowing this is gonna change, like what we see tonight. Kids are gonna move out, kids are gonna move in, we're gonna continue to monitor and manage that. But I need some general guidance tonight. You can see kind of an example of what, if we changed that assumption a little bit, what that would look like for our district. And I just need some direction of, are we pursuing that? Do you want our administrative team to use that board direction tonight?
Do you have a ballpark of what this financial impact is? And if not, that's okay, just curious.
Yeah, we could probably ballpark it.
I was looking for a total.
Is this a
Total growth
reduction
total.
of 6?
Our current 75,000, what is our, I'm not gonna, I'll do it for you.
85,000 with a 4.
It's like 300,000.
So 340-ish?
Yeah.
I mean, that's half the equation.
Yep. And then this is just looking at one level as an example of what we could do. We could look at that across levels, using the guidelines across middle and high school as well. If the board wants to give us that direction.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe the guidance should be, obviously we have our preferences on what we want to limit it to. But should we just raise any restriction on the administration so they can just, you know, hit the ground running and see what they can find?
Well,
I think he's asking.
I think he's asking, are we comfortable if this was one of them, are we comfortable with staffing at the guidelines, but within the contractual limits? So,
Yeah, I think the answer is yeah, right? That's what I'm saying.
Well, I want to make sure.
Without restricting the administration to say we have to, because I feel like that's, you know, if the last 4 years have taught me anything, it's when you put too many constraints on, you don't get the result you want.
Well, last year we put a constraint here, so this is different.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that we've got 4 people that are willing to look at this level of staffing with respect to the guidelines.
I mean, you tell me.
I hear one.
Yeah, you tell me.
Can I hear some thumbs up?
Yeah.
Across elementary, middle, high?
We can,
Yeah.
yeah, you have elementary as an example. It's a typical sheet. We have at meetings, and we're going to continue to bring something like this back. But I think the guidance would be
So this-
helpful if we knew across levels.
So this is not reducing programming at this point.
Right.
This is optimizing our
Yeah, our
staff to
staffing.
adhere to the guidelines within the constraints of the contract. Do we have 4 thumbs up to look at this across all levels?
I mean, just keep in mind, we're not committing to it. It's just a matter of looking at it. I want to look at it.
I'm willing to look at it. So I
To
counted
look
1,
at it.
2,
To look at it.
3. Okay. Okay.
Can I make a suggestion?
Let me ask one more question while we're still looking at this. I still see some blue, right, that's on here.
Yeah.
Are we okay with looking at other avenues to, reduce the amount of blue being under the guidelines, right? If there's any creative solutions we can get to,
So move the blue to black, like
basically move the blue to black, if there's any way to do it. I don't know if there is or not, but
I had thrown out, when I was talking to Craig, like a multi-grade kind of option, which
that would get,
North Barrington did frequently when my kids were in school, so just.
Wait, what
another
is it?
option.
What would you suggest?
So a multi-grade, our district has utilized, other districts have utilized. You do a 4-5 combination classroom, so the teacher would be assigned students at 2 grade levels. I'm not saying we're doing
Sure.
5 just before everyone runs out and says
Right,
4-5. I'm giving it as an example. I know that we have done that as a district in the past. There's a lot of considerations that go into that. We would start with just looking, do the numbers make sense? But then we would also want to ask and look at a lot more depth to that of, do we have staff at that building that have familiarity with the curriculum for those 2 grade levels and experience working with, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot more work that needs to get done. But if the board is giving us
Just gives you
direction
more
to
flexibility.
just give us more flexibility, we can take a look at it.
is everybody comfortable with that? I would say across all district-wide programs, across all grade levels. Is everybody comfortable with looking at those options?
options to move more blue to black, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm seeing at least 4 heads.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's helpful guidance, thank you, board, for both of those. So as we're looking at just general overall categories, to look for 600 to 1.4 to 2.
We're probably
This-
backing off that now.
This is, I know, well, that's why I said, hey, we're not done yet tonight, I need a little more direction from the board in order to know what's inbounds and out of bounds. And we'll bring options to you, but this is helpful.
Are there any more guardrails that you want to gather this evening?
You know, I think another category we've talked about during the committee of the whole in the past is our programs and the size of our programs. That- Do we want to use the same parameters and logic around district programs? Should also utilize the same guidelines that we use at our different grade levels and so forth, meaning district programs, whether they're at elementary, middle, or high school, those programs and the size of the student enrollment in those programs should also be in line with the established guidelines for all sections that we use. Again, this is just high-level guidance.
I would say yes.
I would also.
I would say yes.
I would too.
I mean, I think we should hold all to the same. All programs to the same level.
And we're just looking for now, nothing concrete, right?
Yeah.
Did you see thumbs? Do you want to see more thumbs? Are you nervous?
I don't know if we're at 4.
Are we at 4? Are we at 4?
No.
District-wide?
Yeah.
Let's look at the guidelines.
Early and often.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, all right, thank you, board, I appreciate that, that's helpful for us to know. These are options we can work within, and I wanna reassure the board, we're gonna do the due diligence, we're gonna look at this carefully, and we're gonna continue to monitor it, right? And bring that feedback back, because I don't want the
Yeah.
board to be concerned that we're so locked in that we can't look at these things.
Right. So, I mean, let's just take high school as an example.
Sure.
There's only 3 people interested in underwater basket weaving,
Yeah,
right?
right.
We,
Sounds cool.
we have traditionally not offered that course then, if the enrollment is too low. So if we see trends like that, look for ways to.
Or maybe it could be done through the virtual high school, so, there's options.
possibility.
That's a good point, Barry, that we could look for other options, like a virtual learning experience for our students. If the board is comfortable with that, we could also look for other ways to adjust the way we deliver that program than a traditional in-person signed, to a teacher role in a classroom, especially for sections that only have 3 students in underwater basket
Underwater
weaving.
basket.
Sounds really interesting.
I know, I want to take that class.
Never heard of it, but it sounds cool.
And board, we're okay if we look for options that may consist of that
Yeah.
avenue as well.
What I was going to suggest too is, having spoken to folks in this industry, rather than finding ways to reduce expenses, can we find ways to increase revenue? So, for example, our website, for example, is really, really nice. I mean, why can't we just do what Google does and say, if you want to pay us to put your banner on top so that it says, shop at X, Y, and Z store. I mean, that might be a way to get a couple $100,000 a year. I mean, that was one thing that came through to me as a recommendation. There were others, like, I don't know if we engage our staff on grants, but maybe if we, provided a stipend to a faculty member and said if you were to pursue this grant, this district would take a piece of it, you would take a piece of it for your purposes, something along those lines. But I mean, there are, ways for us to generate revenue. I mean, we already have some of them, right? Like, we have marketing at our football stadium. I mean, can we find some of those examples without, of course, making us like a soccer jersey, right? With all the
Yeah, there's
things, but something along those lines. I think I would think we'd be able to generate hundreds of thousands, about a few million over a 5-year period, doing something along those lines.
So what we could do is we could look at the board's existing policies around advertising and marketing, because we do have, and actually we updated that a few years ago as a community, and we did expand in some areas where we didn't traditionally offer those opportunities. We now have, Steve, to your point, more physical ways to generate. We also have like in-game advertising announcements.
Yep.
We have digital display boards. We have different mechanisms that 20 years ago, we weren't having those conversations. So if the board is interested, our team could look for some additional opportunities. Again, we would need to have the board consider updating maybe some policy language to reflect
needed.
those changes. Sarah, were you going to add something?
Sure, I can comment on grants. Last year, we received the $2 million for PFA. So that is certainly something that we are invested in. I will just comment that a competitive grant is incredibly hard to write.
Sure.
And does take a significant amount of staff time to do so. And we don't have as large of a free and reduced population as maybe some grants would be looking for, so that often can impact us. But we do get the PIE grant and a number of other things that help with staff supplies and things like that. So that's something that we are exploring that in a way that we can manage.
Great. Yeah, no, I have no doubt that
Yeah.
you guys looked into. I'm just saying, are there other opportunities that perhaps we've, deferred in the past? Maybe we look at it now, because I mean, the educators we have are fantastic, and I'm sure if we engage them, Ms. Saddleberry and her team, maybe they'd have folks that would be willing to engage. And I have a couple other ideas too that have been shared with me that I can throw your way as well.
Just something you said sparked my memory too. Like, if we're gonna increase revenues in some areas, I think we talked about this a little bit when we updated the policy last, that could take some more staff to do that as well. So we might increase expenses.
Yeah.
So just wanna make sure
Sure.
that we're not completely blind to that.
No, I mean, I think, I'll just tell you another idea that's come my way is, we have, I'm just using our school, Countryside. We have a gymnasium. Maybe we can rent it out on the weekends when kids aren't using it. And granted, it would require, somebody to go and let folks in. Maybe we'd have to hire a clean company, but if you build into the cost of the lease cost, perhaps you can still make a margin on it. I mean,
We do that.
We do that, and we have a policy for that as well.
Sure. What I'm saying is just, can we do that more so?
Sure, I mean, we can.
I mean, I know, for
We
example,
are
I go
doing
to,
it, but we can actively
right,
pursue.
Right.
Maybe seeing if there's any other
Yeah.
interest or appetite in the community for space.
Space, I mean, I know we have excess space in certain areas too. I mean, it's gonna sound kind of crazy, but, you know, maybe we can offer like Verizon or Sprint or somebody to put up a cell tower in one of the back areas. That's the least cost that we can incur. We do nothing for that except the cost, or except the space that they're taking. I think there are, like I said, dozens of ideas that have been thrown my way that we could
Matt, I
at least
know we've
consider.
expanded with Verizon, I believe.
The high school and
at-
also at North Barrington.
Yeah, so we've done 2 examples of that.
Great.
Steve as
Yeah.
well, absolutely. These are all good ideas, and some we've already done, and some maybe
Yeah, I love it.
we want to increase.
Yeah.
Or look for
And if we're
ways
out
to
there
expand.
anticipating with the new auditorium, that we will probably be able to generate some rental dollars there because we'll
Right.
have more freedom to use it on more
Yeah.
days or weeks or whatever.
So let me ask this question. If the administration comes back and says, oh, gosh, I'd love to do this, but we need to add staff, are we willing to look at increases in expenses in order to augment increases in revenue?
I think the caveat for me is, as long as we can have more in collections than expenses.
Yeah. No, of course.
Absolutely.
Of
Yeah.
course, otherwise I'm assuming you wouldn't bring it forward.
No.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem, like, increasing our cost profile as long as we have an offset and plus some.
Yeah, we want to see a positive gain.
Yeah.
Well, and we want to keep in mind our primary focus is education. We're not, advertisers, we're not marketers. We're,
Sure.
We want our staff focusing on that.
Right.
We don't want to cheapen the product.
Well, that's why I bring up that it
Right.
could cost us money to gain that money, so.
That's where I might be uncomfortable, like if it means that, if we're reducing some kinds of staff while bringing on other kinds of staff, I might be a little squeamish, so
Yeah.
I think we'd have to be really careful.
Well, but I think, to your point too, I mean, I think another consideration, and this is actually an expense increase too, but sometimes it's more cost efficient to bring certain services in-house versus buying it, and I don't know what those are. That's obviously something you guys need to evaluate, but I don't know. I'm just thinking from like my business. It made more sense for us to hire our own custodian versus, using a third party. Because even with benefits, it was cheaper to have someone in-house because then we can allocate that individual to others, sites that we had. So I don't know. I'm just putting that out there as an idea. Are there, and again, I know you guys do this, but are there other things that we can consider that we're not doing right now?
Sorry, this is just, I'm asking more of as a clarification, because I get asked this a lot through the community, and I know we're good, but like when we host an IHSA sports event and we have to pay tickets, like, I know especially with playoffs and stuff, we do not get all that money, correct? And I think definitely the community thinks that we do. And, it's like with football games and
Good
basketball
point of
games and stuff.
clarification, yes. Money goes back to
Yes.
the organization.
And I think that's a very big misconception over, and
That's
that
a good
we're
point.
also being forced to charge.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Is everybody clear
So
on that? Do
unfortunately, we
need
can't
a-
make money on that, Steve, sorry.
Well, maybe not that, but maybe someone else, right?
No, but it's unfortunate, but no.
I mean, I love the fact that we we utilize BHS for the Nutcracker every year. I mean, I don't know how much we make there, but are there other opportunities like that?
We
I
rent it
think
at
it's-
like the station stage and cafeteria to local Montessori's who want to have plays there.
Oh, is that
too.
right?
Mhm.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah, so I don't know, just, if there's any excess capacity for that, I think, maybe not in 2 weeks, but sometime in the next, 12 months, something for us to look into.
Okay.
Because I don't think any of these need to be, next 2 weeks type deals. I think a lot of these are probably gonna take some research and have some phone calls, quite frankly.
This is good information as we're doing our annual budget planning for us to look for areas, again, to allocate our resources to meet all of our needs in the different categories, right? And I'm very intentionally saying that. I mean, I do worry about when we have terms like cost cutting and stuff like that. This is
Yeah.
about budget planning. This is about allocation of resources, because we're shifting some dollars from one area to the other. Like we do with everything, we're always evaluating our needs and where those monies can be best served. So it is important. I think we've identified a number of categories that helps administration then with direction, interest, and desire of the board, we've also identified a few areas where our administration will go back and look to see if there's any revenue generators as well, that could maybe help us.
I'm looking at our framework 220 here. I keep looking over there and I'm like, wow, we've asked a lot of this administration already, and we've got a referendum that we're embarking on. For Build 220, we ended up having to augment the staff a little bit. So I want to make sure that we think about that too, and if we need to do any augmentation for Transform 220, we consider that as well. But I want to see some thumbs up from the board if that's okay to go that direction as well.
I'm sorry, Sandra, say it again. What is your
Oh,
ask?
for Build 220,
Yeah.
we added some staff, we added
Yeah.
some temporary staff, right? To
Right.
help us get through, so, because we've got Framework 220, we've got now Transform 220. Now we're talking about marketing revenue, like, we're adding on. I just want to make sure that we're cognizant of that,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, I see.
And what's our focus? Leah, you brought it up, like, what's our core competency here? And I think that's what we're talking about with Framework 220 too.
It is,
So.
yeah, no, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think our goal, though, is whatever cost savings we generate or additional revenue we, are able to collect, it's all gonna go back towards the students and the educators.
Right, but,
But it can
people-
distract.
Yes,
right?
it can distract. I mean, people ask me in my everyday life, oh, should I sell my house, buy a different house, and rent the old house? And I'm like, well, what's your day job? And, they might say, oh, I'm a doctor and I work 80 hours a week. And I'm like, do you really want to be a landlord too? And, what's your primary focus? So that's where
I
I'm
see.
coming from with that. It's like, that's a great idea, but how much time do you have in your day,
Well,
right? And what's our focus here?
You make a good point, and I think this is, again, something that I know I've done in my private life, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels about this, but, I've hired chief administrative officers in the past and said, your job is to do X, Y, and Z. So if the focus of the administration is education and, educator management, that's fine. I have no problem if you hire, this is me speaking for myself, I would have no problem with you hiring an expert in marketing and pay them whatever the market rate is for that marketer, provided that the marketing revenue they bring in is projected to be something greater than that, because any incremental they bring in would still benefit the students and the educators in our district.
I understand. I just want to make sure we're continuing to focus on Framework 220, which we've already committed
Yeah.
to. We've
Yeah.
already focused on Transform 220, which this community just asked us to focus on. If there's any other things we need to consider as you're looking at these reductions, I also want to be able to consider any additional staff that might be needed as well to get us through that.
Yeah, bring that forward. I think that's fair.
Whether it be whatever
I
it may
mean,
be.
yeah, no, Sandra, I'm with you. I think that's fair, because, I don't think anybody here was hired to be a marketer.
Right.
So, I mean, if we need to bring in something outside to do it, provided that they can cover their costs, right?
I think we're talking about two different things, Steve.
No, I
Sandra's
think-
talking about
no,
one
I
thing,
think
you're talking
we're-
about a different thing.
We're talking about the same thing, right?
It's part of it, but I think what you're also alluding to is that the common phrase, we can do anything, we can't do everything.
Agreed.
And to Sandra's point, we have a lot. This is maybe one of the busiest times in the last decade for our district that I can recall, where we have a successful referendum and all the work that entails a successful referendum at the same time that we've launched probably one of arguably our more holistic, ambitious, great word, Barry, strategic plans with 28 objectives, and we're still working through all of the things to deliver on the promise to our community of rigorous academics in safe and inclusive environments, right? And so when you take all those things, I appreciate you pointing out that there are some needs for us to make sure that we're focused on those. We can pick up some
And
other
the
things.
bottom line is the bandwidth of your administration
Totally.
is maxed right now.
I don't want to
You have be
constrain and
careful.
say you can't look at marketing ideas, but I personally would want us to prioritize what we already have on our plate first.
Sure.
But if you tell me that that's fine, you can do, then I'm all ears.
No, and that's
right?
why I was reiterating our bandwidth is very, very tapped right now to meet all these competing things and continue to get green check marks that are not just done for done's sake, but actually done well. Yeah, you're getting a lot of mileage.
Yeah,
out of
not
that,
just a
Sarah.
check, not a black check, but a green check.
No, I really
Green
mean it.
check.
It's good, but it's a good product. It's gonna benefit the district for years to come. Like some of the things we've been able to accomplish, like full day kindergarten, new programming models for our students, a long-range facility planning tool, like those things. That's high quality, like, and it's accomplishing what we set out to do. At a certain point, that's gonna diminish if we keep adding to the plate.
I mean, to answer your question, I think it is wise, right, to see, I think if we're maxing out on the bandwidth and we need to also take on Transform 220, which is like super exciting, like we talked about, I think it'd be wise to look at, you know, some, like, more resources if we need to bring people on. I think at the same time, we also need to be really clear with our timing and our messaging, because I can see some pushback with folks saying, at the same time you're considering bringing folks on to help, you're also considering things like class sizes that, you know, that could cause staff adjustments as well. And so I think that, you know, we just need to be really thoughtful about it and clear to our community as we're kind of thinking through these things.
Yes.
Well said.
Agreed.
Can I ask a semi-unrelated question? In the past, I thought we had somebody in the administration that was kind of responsible for grant writing. Do we not have somebody who's part of their job description is grant writing? I'm just asking.
They write the grants that we have, so they're not necessarily writing for new grants, not that we don't from time to time, but we have a number of grants that we've received, the IDEA grant, all of our title grants, we then have to write for those,
Okay.
if that makes sense, but
Yeah, the writing and management in terms of the expenditure reports, yes, all of that is done in-house. We have earned and received several competitive grants over the last several years, including but not limited to the Freedom Schools grant that Sunny Hill received, including our Ag Incentive grant through ISB and our Three Circles grant through ISB. So that is work that we are constantly exploring and committed to doing.
But we forget about the second half, where you have to report back how you followed through, right? And there's work with that too.
Yeah, time and effort.
That's the part that we don't think about. We're like, got it,
Yeah.
done. You know, and we never really think about that.
There's a lot more that goes into it.
Yeah.
Good point.
Can I throw out another idea? Since we're going on the topic of, our core, which is obviously education, I know I run this by you at the beginning of the year because somebody asked this question, but why don't we allow, is there a regulatory or a law that prohibits us from allowing students from outside the district to come and have them pay a market tuition?
It's generated by our policy that we
So it's our
set
policy.
for being a resident of our community. I think with that as well, we just had a long conversation about class sizes. There's an impact.
Sure.
If we collect that money, right, that feels good because we now have more revenue, but there is the management of that, and I think, we have a high quality product that may be desirable. We'd have to think that through all the way as to how do we manage and continue to maintain our class sizes at the same time that, I don't know, I'm gonna brag about our district. I think that may be something that would generate a lot of revenue, but also generate a lot of interest and generate a lot of students. And I don't know if we're equipped to actually manage that, or that we have facilities that could significantly increase in order to meet that demand.
Well, I
I'm
mean,
not saying it's impossible, but there
I mean,
may be.
we can be selective, right? I mean, granted, it's just the elementary roster here, but there are quite a few that are below guideline. I mean, and if we just said, hey, you know what, you don't have a choice. You must go to this elementary, and you must provide your own transportation. And if we charge, I'm making up a number, but if we're saying the cost per student is $20,000, maybe we factor in a reasonable markup. I don't know. I feel like that could be an opportunity if we get 10, 15, 20 kids to fill in these gaps.
We do allow for summer school, right? We do.
But we don't make money on summer school.
I'm just I'm just saying, another thing that we talked about the last couple of years is the law that changed allows us, for our staff, to bring their kids here as well. And we agreed not to do that at this point in time.
Sure.
You know, for the same kind of reasons, right?
Yeah, a project of that scale would, we just got a conversation about what are we focused on, what's our bandwidth?
Yeah.
So you're saying that would be a very complicated?
That would be a very complicated,
Okay.
and I would not want to rush that, because if you're going to offer that and bring kids into the district, I believe you honor your commitments, and we'd have to commit to that. So I'd want to really make sure we've got a well-developed, well-thought-out plan in order to meet that expectation and be able to sustain
Yeah.
the expectation. And like I said, I'm not opposed to it. It's not part of our framework objectives.
There's no restrictions around sports with that. I can see that opening up a huge can of worms.
There's that.
Right.
There's so
Yeah.
many.
It's gonna be a recruiting thing.
Honestly, I
I'll
would
use the expression, you pull that thread, you get the whole sweater. And there's a lot to all of those
And
pieces.
it's cold outside if you need a sweater on.
Right, so I'm not opposed to it, but that would really, I think, take a lot of time to get it right, to introduce new students to our district.
I would say that would have to come out of a strategic discussion even,
I would
right?
too.
The next framework 220
Yeah.
or what have you.
And I would want to do a serious community engagement on that too. At
Yeah.
least I think the board would, if we look at how we make those type of scale decisions, usually that
Yeah,
our
no, of course.
process has been an advisory committee. We're not right now planning to do any of that because we have a little less than half of the objectives still to go with framework. So I like the idea, Steve.
I do
I
too.
want to be honest with the board that.
Yeah, no, and that's fine.
it's-
I'm not saying these are things, again, we need to do in 2 weeks or even just
I
12
also
months for that
see,
matter.
I mean, we just passed this awesome referendum and I see enrollment changing. I keep finding myself thinking about, you know, what this, it's even more of a destination district.
You're saying starting in 28?
No, I think people are smart enough to know,
saying
starting
move.
now, right? We've just
Well,
improved
there's-
every one of our facilities, right? And we're gonna improve them even more.
And there's some subdivisions that are happening in our district.
That's a great point. Yeah,
So-
some new ones that are
Yeah.
popping up, yeah.
But that did come up in policy, that question of do we allow staff's children to come? And that's exactly why we didn't advance it to the full board, because it could.
We did talk about it at the board
We
table.
did talk
we
about
talked
it,
about
yeah,
it.
but
We
we
did.
decided not to.
But we decided not to
Cross that
implement that,
bridge.
right?
Yeah.
For the same kind of.
Because it would unravel so much.
It is, and there's lots of really good ideas, just not right now. Maybe later, maybe through another strategic planning initiative, right? For our district's needs may also change. So, I just want to be, I mean, I always want to say yes, but there are certain things I just want to make sure that the board understands. It's a heavy lift, but if you want us to invest that type of time and energy, I would really need to work with the staff to understand that, so.
And it's great to brainstorm, Steve.
It is
Throw
great.
things out there. It's cool. to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that Barry and I talked about, that we wanted to bring to finance at some point, so I
Yeah.
don't know, so there's not good about it now.
All right, so I'm gonna circle back to our 600 to 1.4.
Okay.
Are we wanting to ask for more than 1.4 for all of the things that we just discussed? I'm seeing.
Do you
I
need
would-
more guidance if we were to go to 2, or could we stop at where we gave what we gave you?
I believe we have enough guidance tonight with what was provided for our team to go back and actually look to see examples in areas. I'm not doing enough napkin math right now to know, Aaron, but our team could work on that and I could get that back to the board.
So do we wanna leave here saying at least 1.4?
That's
But
it.
if
Sure.
you'd like to go further, we are interested in hearing more. Is
Got
that a
it.
good way to put it, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
I know it's been a long day. I'm looking for some thumbs.
That's great.
Good.
Okay.
I can take my glasses off, if that helps.
Good one. All right.
All right,
Okay.
Sarah,
let's see.
have you reached your final slide
I'm gonna
now?
take it home.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
I should have added another bullet now that we were talking. So I will update the assumption sheet to reflect the conservative base model that we have landed on. I will finalize the model as is for now, and then as we offer some different options for you to consider, I will then finalize the model again once those decisions are made. Jen and I will begin the 25-26 budget planning process, and then Nicole will work on capital recommendations for summer of '26.
And the final budget we do in what, September?
Yep, so you'll see a tentative in July. Well, finance will see it in July, and then the full board will see it in August.
Way to bring us home.
There we go.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, board, for the guidance.
Great discussion. Thank you, board. I'm not going to ask for adjournment because we do need to go back into closed session. We don't anticipate taking any further action or having any further discussion. We will come back to the room to check to make sure nobody's here, but with that, are we ready to go back to closed, board?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good discussion.
Yes.